Chapter 191. Chu Qingyin was carried on the fat man's shoulder. Her head was heavy and her feet were light. Her stomach kept churning and she was about to vomit. She immediately whimpered. The fat man felt her struggle and immediately said angrily, "What's the matter?" Chu Qingyin's mouth was blocked, so she could only continue whimpering. The fat man was a little impatient and tore away the cloth blocking her mouth. As soon as he took it away, the water immediately flowed down 3,000 feet. The fat man looked at the filth on his body and flew into a rage out of humiliation. Just as he was about to throw her down, he heard Chu Qingyin leisurely wipe her mouth with the rainwater. She narrowed her eyes and looked at him. "If you dare to throw me, I guarantee that you don't need to cross the river. You can directly cross the Wanchuan River." The fat man heard this and sneered. "You think I don't dare to throw you?" Chu Qingyin raised her chin, looking as if she was at his mercy. At this moment, the shrewd woman glared at the fat man. "At this juncture, don't cause any trouble for me. This person is our protective talisman. Hold on tight. If you fall, you'll suffer." After being threatened by the shrewd woman, the fat man became much more obedient. However, his gaze towards Chu Qingyin was still filled with fierce anger. From afar, they saw a wooden pole with a large horizontal cloth hanging on it. The wind was raging, and that horizontal cloth was fluttering in the wind. On it was written a fairy. The shrewd woman and the other two were overjoyed and quickened their pace. As long as they reached the ferry and boarded the boat, everything would be safe. Chu Qingyin's heart sank. She allowed them to bring her closer and closer to the ferry. The rain did not become lighter. Instead, it became heavier and heavier, as if it was going to drown the entire world. Chu Qingyin felt that the rainwater on her face was like beans crashing down. It was a little painful. Coupled with the speed of these people, the pain intensified. However, she could not care so much at this moment. She looked at the approaching ferry and thought about how to get away. Once they reached the ferry, the fat man saw her being thrown to the ground. Fortunately, the ground was built with wooden planks. However, Chu Qingyin could not help but cry out softly. The scarred chef looked at Chu Qingyin, who was crawling up, and spat. "I didn't expect a young master with soft skin and tender flesh to be able to endure hardship. If she was crying, we would have killed her long ago." The fat man shook his sore arm in disdain. The shrewd woman glanced at the two. "Now is not the time for meaningless discussions. There is a boat. Think of a way to get it over here." The three of them looked in the direction of the shrewd woman's finger and saw a small house next to the ferry. There was a small boat tied to a wooden stake at the entrance of the house, and there was a fire inside the house, proving that there was someone inside. "Let's go and take a look." The fat man wanted to grab Chu Qingyin's collar, but she tilted her head and avoided him. "Hey!" The fat man laughed coldly. He pushed her back and urged, "Hurry up, short legs." The moment he said that, the scarred chef and the shrewd woman could not help but smile mockingly at Chu Qingyin. Chu Qingyin frowned. She did not want to argue with them. Soon, they arrived at the entrance of the small house. The fat man knocked on the door vigorously. The people inside immediately responded, I'm coming. An old boatman in his 60s opened the door. Before he could see who was outside, there was a large knife on his neck. The old boatman was so scared that he almost fainted. The fat man dragged the old boatman out and pointed at the small boat. He said fiercely, "Hurry up and unlock that lock for me. Otherwise, I will send you to hell right now." The old boatman was so scared that his legs trembled. Okay. Chu Qingyin could clearly feel that these three people were cruel by nature. They would not let the old boatman go. She was worried. At this moment, the old boatman took out the key on his body and unlocked the heavy lock with trembling hands. The fat man's knife was already hanging above the old boatman's head. It was as if as soon as he unlocked the lock, what awaited him would be a fatal blow. Chu Qingyin bit her lip. What should she do? Due to fear and the heavy rain, the old boatman tried for a long time, but still could not unlock the lock. The fat man was getting impatient and took a step forward. Chu Qingyin caught a glimpse of the oar on the wooden plank from the corner of her eye. She estimated the distance between them and the length of the oar. It was just right. Hua hua. The lock was unlocked. In the blink of an eye, Chu Qingyin took advantage of the fact that no one was paying attention. She picked up the oar and slammed it at the fat man's hand. The fat man was caught off guard. His large knife fell into the water beside him. He lost his balance and almost fell into the water. Chu Qingyin had already stepped forward and pulled the frightened old boatman behind her. She held the oar in front of her chest and confronted the three people. "You can't kill the innocent." Chu Qingyin looked at them righteously. That slap had used up all of her strength. The fat man was now holding his wrist and screaming, threatening to kill her. The shrewd woman and the scarred chef's faces were very ugly. Under their eyes, the prey actually stretched out her claws. It was simply a great humiliation. "Brat, do you think that with your small body and that wooden plank, you can defeat us, the three demons? I suggest you obediently put down the oar. Otherwise, don't blame us for being impolite." The shrewd woman approached her step by step with a sinister smile on her face. Did they really think she was a child? Once she put down the oar, the only thing that awaited the old boatman was death, and she would be captured onto the small boat. They approached step by step while she retreated step by step with the old boatman. When her back hit the wooden plank and she couldn't retreat anymore, Chu Qingyin frowned deeply. Turin had taught her a set of sword skills. Although she wasn't proficient in it, she could still use a few moves. In order to stall for time, she had to use her or to fight them. So she stood up and used the oar as a sword, pointing it at the three people in front of her. "I'll go with you. You let this innocent old boatman go. What qualifications do you have to negotiate with the three of us?" The scarred chef sneered. "Try peaceful means before resorting to force. Since peaceful means don't work, then we'll just use force. Take out your weapons." Chu Qingyin slowly raised her arm and looked at them with a determined gaze. "Ha ha! A little girl who hasn't even grown out her hair dares to challenge us. Then let me do it. Brat, watch your skin carefully." The scarred chef pulled out his large knife and walked forward sinisterly. Chu Qingyin gulped. Even Qing Yi couldn't defeat them. She didn't have any chance of winning. But this was the only thing she could do. She had to bite the bullet. The large knife whistled over. She nimbly turned around and dodged the sharp tip of the knife. She flipped over and landed behind him. She raised the oar and was about to swing it at him. However, this person seemed to have eyes on the back of his head. He stretched out his broadsword to block and then exerted force, causing her to retreat a few steps. Then his fist landed on her shoulder, causing her to fly straight to the wooden pole. She crashed into the thick wooden pole and broke it. Then she rolled to the ground. Chu Qingyin felt pain in her chest. She spat out a mouthful of blood. When it landed in the water, it immediately scattered into red flowers. The scarred chef walked forward. Just as he was about to stab her again, the sound of the tower bell pierced through the thunder and rain and entered everyone's ears. Then a voice sounded. "Wait!" Chapter 192. The scarred chef's knife paused in midair, and he cursed, "Which blind fool dares to block my way?" But the moment he turned his head, he was stunned. Chu Qingyin's chest hurt, and she coughed lightly. But every breath she took affected the wound on her shoulder, and she sucked in a breath of cold air. It was thanks to this pain that she was able to stay awake and not pass out. She raised her head to look in the direction of the sound. Who would suddenly appear? Not far away on the river, a small boat floated down from the front. A youth in white monk robes stood on it, holding a plain paper umbrella. The torrential rain seemed to be blocked by his umbrella, and strings of water droplets flowed down the edge of the umbrella. They were instantly blown away by the wind, and the bean-sized droplets quickly melted into the wind and rain. She couldn't see his face clearly, nor did she need to. She only felt that he was a ray of white light that cut across the horizon, the only pearl in this dark world. One person, one umbrella, one boat, riding the wind and riding the waves, like an immortal flying from the heavens. Chu Qingyin was stunned. Was she hallucinating because of her injury? Was that why she saw Su Jian, who should be in the capital? Fraud? Three benefactors. The sea of bitterness has no bounds. Turn back to the shore before it's too late. Without using any oars, The small boat stopped in front of the ferry. Su Jian held the umbrella in one hand, and the fingers of the other clasped together, bowing to the people on the shore. A familiar voice, a familiar tone, and a familiar face. Chu Qingyin's first thought was, how did Su Jian fly all the way from the capital city to this place? Master, save us? The moment the old boatman saw Su Jian, he immediately got up and knelt to beg for help. Seeing this, the fat man disliked the old boatman for talking too much. He couldn't help but spin the axe in his hand to chop at the old boatman. Seeing that the axe was about to land on the old boatman, Su Jian raised his hand and waved. The water in the air condensed into the shape of a water arrow and shot towards the axe. The water arrow and the axe clashed, but in the end, the axe in the fat man's hand was no match for the power of the water arrow and was sent flying. The axe spun half a circle in the air and stabbed into a wooden plank. Su Jian's attack was clearly too unexpected, and it immediately deterred everyone. The shrewd woman and the others had not taken him seriously, but now that they saw him send the fat man's weapon flying with a single move, they immediately became vigilant. Grandmaster, we're dealing with some business here. Please don't interfere, the shrewd woman said coquettishly as she winked at Su Jian, trying to persuade him to leave. Chu Qingyin rolled her eyes. She was already a middle-aged woman, yet she was still trying to act cute like a little girl. It was simply too shameful. Su Jian still clasped his fingers together and bowed. Benefactors, the heavens will not allow you to harm the lives of others. There are too many vengeful souls in your hands who have yet to be reborn. If you do not put down your butcher's knife, what awaits you is Avicii. If the soft approach did not work, he would use the hard approach. When the scarred chef heard this, he said angrily, "Where did this stinky monk come from? How dare you meddle in our business? Do you know who we are? Whether your status is noble or ordinary, you're just a drop in the ocean. This is not your business. You've already committed grave sins by harming innocent people." Su Jian slowly walked up to the ferry, the bell at his waist fluttering in the wind. Its crisp sound was like the sound of a fairy, cleansing the filth in people's hearts. When the shrewd woman and the others saw him leave the boat, they all took a few steps back. They were afraid of an expert's aura, so they could not help but retreat. A clear sound with each step, and a lotus with each step. Chu Qingyin lay on the ground, looking at the person not far away. He walked closer step by step, but the rain was too heavy, so she could not see clearly. But for some reason, the faint smile at the corner of his mouth entered her eyes. It was neither sad nor happy, neither resentful nor angry. It was noble and proud, like a snow lotus blooming at the corner of his mouth, picking flowers and smiling drunkenly. This sentence suddenly appeared in her mind. A young monk came over on a light boat, holding a white umbrella, a lotus with each step, and a spring breeze with each smile. This scene took root in her memory. Every time she recalled it, she would think that the sky was not filled with raging wind and rain, but with pure and holy lotus petals. Are you willing to lay down your weapons and repent? Su Jian stopped 7 steps away from them. The white umbrella just happened to cover Chu Qingyin, who was sitting in the rain. He looked at the 3 people in front of him with a serious expression. "You bald donkey, mind your own business. Get out of our way, we still have to hurry." The fat man was somewhat impatient. He ignored the shrewd woman's expression and shouted at Su Jian. "Since you're still so stubborn, then this poor monk will offend you." Su Jian said softly, "Amit ba." When the 3 heard this, they looked at each other and instantly flashed their weapons. If this dragged on, the people from the inn would probably arrive. At most, they would give up on the young master and cross the river no matter what. The rain gradually became heavier. Everyone was drenched. Other than Su Jian, who held a paper umbrella in his hand, his body was dry and clean. The umbrella in his hand covered the ground 3 inches away from him. Chu Qingyin raised her head and saw that the person beside her was pure and clean. She was far better than the 3 evil people in the rain. "Great master, if you can't beat them, then quickly run," Chu Qingyin said softly in a hoarse voice. She had never seen Su Jian fight before. She only felt that chanting sutras and Buddhist scriptures suited him better. Fighting had nothing to do with him. Even if his martial arts were strong, these three people were not easy to deal with. He could deal with one, but if the three of them worked together, it would be a little tricky. Therefore, in order not to implicate too many people, Chu Qingyan whispered to him. Although the rain was very loud, he could clearly hear the voices of the people behind him. He smiled slightly. Don't be afraid. If you don't dare to look, then close your eyes. Chu Qingyan could not help but sigh. That was all she had to say. She hoped that this fraud would not show off. After all, these three people were famous in the Jianghu. A fraud against a villain. This scene was too beautiful. She did not dare to look. With the fat man's failure as a precedent, the three people decided to attack together. Axes, broadswords, and short spears were all thrown at Su Jian. Su Jian dodged the heavy axe to the left and hit the fat man's wrist with one hand. The axe fell to the ground. With a backhand push, he used 50% of his inner strength to hit the scarred chef's chest. He used the force to change the direction of the broadsword and caught the shrewd woman's short spear. The short spear was sent flying. In just a short moment, he had already dropped the three people's weapons. However, he still stood in the same place without moving. Good. Su Jian said with his eyes closed. Chu Qingyan was a little stunned. Although she was very close to him, she still could not see how he attacked. She could only say that his movements were very fast. It was not something that could be seen with the naked eye. At this moment, the three people flew into a rage out of humiliation and attacked Su Jian with their bare hands. Chapter 193. The three of them were highly skilled. They all rushed towards Su Jian, each taking a position. They cooperated well, not giving him a chance to defend himself. Su Jian chanted Amitabha softly, then flew up and tapped the scarred chef's shoulder with the tip of his foot. With a light push, the scarred chef knelt on the ground. Seeing this, the fat man flew across the air with a kick. Su Jian raised his hand to block it, using gentleness to counter strength, and sent the fat man, who weighed several hundred pounds, crashing into the ground. The shrewd woman was shocked and angry when she saw that her men had been subdued. From the corner of her eye, she saw Chu Qingyan, who was half sitting on the ground. She immediately thought of a plan and reached out to pull her to her side. But just as her hand was about to touch her shoulder, a sharp arrow pierced through the air and through the shrewd woman's palm. Ah! The shrewd woman's scream pierced through the air. Chu Qingyan turned her head. In the hazy rain, she saw the person on the fierce horse who had put away his bow and arrow and was looking at her. Big Ice Cube. Chu Qingyan could not help but smile. You're finally here. Luckily, I didn't give up. Turin's men quickly surrounded the ferry. When the three demons of heaven, earth, and man saw this, their faces turned ashen. They should have been able to escape, but who knew that a bald donkey would appear out of nowhere? Xiao Su dismounted and walked quickly toward Chu Qingyan. When he squatted down to look at her at eye level, he saw the pale, little fellow smile at him. Big Ice Cube, you're here? Before Xiao Su could respond, the little fellow in front of him coughed out a mouthful of blood, then fell to the side. He reached out to catch her tottering body. At this moment, her eyes were tightly shut, and there was no trace of blood in them. His eyes narrowed. Empty spirit. Ethereal quickly rushed over and placed his finger on her wrist to check her pulse. After a moment, he looked up and said to his master, Little Master has suffered some internal injuries. He needs to be treated as soon as possible. Xiao Su's expression was terrifyingly dark. At this moment, Turin came forward to ask for instructions. Master, how should we deal with these three peoples? Xiao Su picked up the man on the ground by his waist and said coldly, Cripple his martial arts. No, don't cripple our martial arts. When the three of them heard this, they immediately begged for mercy and fear. Once their martial arts were crippled, they would be crippled. Turin turned around and looked at the three ferocious men. At this moment, he was already trembling with regret for provoking them. He said coldly, It's too late to regret. This is the price you have to pay. With a wave of his hand, the black-clothed men behind him stepped forward and prepared to make a move. Master Su Jian, thank you for saving me again. Xiao Su nodded at him before mounting his horse. I was entrusted by someone to search for my long-lost family. Originally, I was also looking for these 3 Shas, but I happened to run into Almsgiver Chu at the ferry crossing. It was just a simple task. Ba. Su Jian smiled. No matter what, I still have to thank Master. Now that the rain has not stopped, if Master doesn't mind, you can also rest at the inn for the night. After Xiao Su finished speaking, he conveniently landed on his horse and turned it around to head back in the direction they had come from. At this moment, a guard brought a horse to Su Jian. Su Jian thought for a moment, then took the reins. Xiao Su pulled the ice-cold little fellow into his arms. Her usually healthy and rosy lips were now slightly purple from the cold. His eyes darkened. With one hand protecting her and the other holding the reins, he quickly rode back to the inn. Ethereal and the others were left behind. They could not catch up no matter how hard they tried. Once they arrived at the inn, everyone was shocked to see their master, who was covered in cold air, and the young princess consort, who was completely drenched. Xiao Su carried the person in his arms upstairs without stopping. He ordered, Huang Yi, prepare ginger soup. Xining, Lve, prepare hot water and clean clothes. Oh yes. The people who had been called out immediately split up to carry out their tasks. Xiao Su kicked open the door and placed the person on the bed. At this time, Xining and Lve had already entered. He immediately ordered, change out of your wet clothes. Be careful of the wound on your shoulder. Yes. The two hurriedly responded. Xiao Su stood to the side, watching them do as they were told. Xining was just about to take off her master's outer clothes when she saw Lord standing in the room like a door god. She immediately asked weakly, Lord, can you leave first? Xiao Su frowned. Why should Ben Wang leave? Don't dawdle. Hurry. Lve wrung the towel dry. Hearing this, she said with a slight smile, Lord, your clothes are also soaked. Go back to the room and change into a clean set of clothes. Otherwise, when the young princess consort changes her clothes and your cold air spreads, it won't be good. Xiao Su felt that it made sense. After giving a few more instructions, he turned and left the room. Xining gave Lve a big thumbs up. Lve shook her head with a smile and said, Let's change the young princess consort into dry clothes first. All right. The two quickly changed out of Chu Qingyin's wet clothes. They used hot water to wipe their bodies and quickly put on clean clothes. After they finished, Lve opened the door to let the people outside in. Xiao Su came in with Ethereal. Ethereal inspected Chu Qingyin's wounds and then took out his needles. He said to Lord, Young princess consort's shoulder is heavily injured. Blood clots have blocked her meridians. This subordinate will first unblock her meridians and let the blood flow smoothly. Xiao Su nodded. His eyes were fixed on that pale little face. When Ethereal's needles pierced her meridians, large beads of sweat appeared on her forehead. Her moist lips were about to be bitten through by her unconsciously. Xiao Su sat down. His hands held her hand that was tightly gripping the blanket, wanting to pass his body's warmth to her. Ethereal had practiced medicine for many years and had never had such a difficult time. It was just a simple unpacking of meridians, but his forehead was covered in a thin layer of sweat. The main reason was that the person beside him was too strong. It caused him to think carefully before he inserted each needle. He clearly knew these meridians inside out and could do it with his eyes closed. Ethereal sighed. If Ashimi saw this scene, she would probably mock him for a long time. Half an hour later, Kong Ling breathed a sigh of relief and took back all the silver needles. He stood up and said to his master, Young princess consort is fine now. This subordinate will bandage her wound, and she will be fine. Xiao Su took a look at the little guy whose breathing was almost steady, and only then did he feel relieved. But when Ethereal came over with medicine and gauze, Xiao Su ordered him to put it on the table and then leave. Ethereal glanced at the unconscious young princess consort on the bed and then glanced at Lord. He instantly understood. It seemed that Lord still preferred to do things personally for the young princess consort. He didn't know if Lord's abilities had improved after using the young princess consort as a test subject. He was somewhat expectant, but right now, the most important thing for him was to drink a bowl of ginger soup. Achoo! Chapter 194. When she woke up, she felt like she had been crushed by something. Her entire body ached. Chu Qingyin struggled to open her eyes. She wanted to get up, but she accidentally pulled on the wound on her shoulder. She felt a sharp pain and instantly woke her up. She raised her right hand to her left shoulder and felt the gauze under her clothes. The memories of last night came back one by one. After recalling everything, she sighed. She was injured again. How unlucky. She didn't know how long she would have to rest this time. It would be best if she didn't affect the progress of the big ice cube's journey. Her small movements did not escape Xiao Su's ears. He got up and walked to the bed. He lifted the bed curtain with one hand and hooked it on a silver hook. Then he sat down by the bed. How do you feel? Hearing this, Chu Qingyin raised her head and looked at him with eyes that were faintly watery. At that time, she thought she would lose her little life. But when the big ice cube's figure flashed in her mind, she didn't know where she got the strength to use teleportation to slightly turn her body. Otherwise, that palm would not have pierced her shoulder, but her heart. I'm fine. I'm fine. Her voice was slightly choked, but she pretended to be fine. Xiao Su's heart softened. He reached out and tucked her in. He softly said, "It's all in the past. Don't be afraid." It was rare for the big ice cube to be so gentle to her. The lingering fear in her heart was touched. Chu Qingyin sniffled and said, "As expected, the Jianghu is sinister. People's hearts are also sinister. I've never seen such a vicious person. They actually killed their customers and then sold them to the next customer to eat. Then they killed the next customer. This cycle keeps repeating. I don't know how they feel after making all this money. People's hearts are unfathomable. The outside world is like this. The weak are prey to the strong. This is just the beginning. There are many more terrifying things to face. If you're afraid, this king will send someone to send you back to the capital and let you be with your parents. At the same time, this king will also send people to protect you." He said he would protect her, but she was injured in just a few days. Xiao Su began to doubt if he could really protect her on this journey. When he saw her vomit blood last night, his heart suddenly hurt. Since last night, he began to doubt himself. Actually, his decision to take her away from the capital was wrong. No. I'm not afraid at all. Even if I was injured by a palm, even if that large blade fell, I never gave up hope. I know that you will come back to save me." When Chu Qingyin heard that Jiang Yi wanted her to return to the capital, she immediately panicked. It was not easy for her to finally be able to accompany Big Ice Cube. She did not want to give up halfway. What's more, it was not even halfway yet. It was only a few days away from the capital. "No, Big Ice Cube, don't make me go back, all right?" Chu Qingyin reached out with her uninjured hand and grabbed his hand. Her eyes were glistening with tears as she spoke pitifully. "Don't act like a spoiled child. Speak properly." Every time she showed this kind of expression, no matter how hard his heart was, it would be softened by her. Xiao Su rubbed his forehead, feeling a bit helpless. Seeing this move work again, Chu Qingyin rejoiced in her heart. She planned to act like a spoiled child to the end. "Big Ice Block, you don't understand me at all. I just got injured and you want to chase me away. You don't care about me at all." Woo-woo. Chu Qingyin covered her eyes with her hands. Her voice was mournful, as if she was crying her heart out. Xiao Su crossed his arms as he looked at the little fellow who was secretly peeking at him from between her fingers. When she realized she had been discovered, she quickly closed her fingers and sobbed. Although he knew she was pretending, for some reason, he still surrendered in his heart. "All right, this king didn't chase you away. Don't make yourself sound so pitiful. Otherwise, if Imperial Grandfather heard it, he would think that this king didn't want you to fulfill your promise to him." When Chu Qingyin heard this, she immediately removed her claws. Her face was filled with pride, and there were no tears. But seeing that the person in front of her had an expression that said, "I knew it," she laughed and cleverly changed the topic. "Then how are my injuries? When can I get out of bed?" She blinked and asked, "You didn't have a fever last night. which means your wounds aren't infected. So as long as you rest, you'll be alive and kicking again very soon. It wasn't that Xiao Su didn't see through her thoughts, but he still let her be. Hearing this, Chu Qingyan looked at the big ice block whose eyes were slightly bloodshot and couldn't help asking, "Did you not sleep at all last night?" If he hadn't taken care of her for an entire night, he wouldn't have appeared in the room so coincidentally, and his eyes wouldn't have a faint tiredness. Xiao Su rubbed her head. "It's nothing. I just couldn't sleep." "Then quickly go and rest. I'm fine here. I have Xining and the others to take care of me, so don't worry." Chu Qingyan immediately urged him to rest. Xiao Su saw that although her face was a little pale, she was still in good spirits. Most importantly, she needed to rest now, so he nodded and got up. Xiao Su walked out of the room and saw Ethereal waiting at the door. "You want to go in and take Xingyan's pulse?" Ethereal shook his head and said with a worried expression, "This subordinate wants to take a look at Lord's body." "After you exchanged blows with that black-clothed man yesterday, this subordinate noticed that your breathing was a little unstable. It seems that you're injured." Xiao Su replied indifferently, "It's fine, don't worry." But Ethereal wanted to persuade him, but Lord raised his hand and stopped him. "There's no need to say anything more. This prince knows his own body best." With that, Xiao Su walked into the room that LVE had prepared for him. Ethereal shook his head. No, he was still worried. No matter what, he had to take Lord's pulse. But as subordinates, they could never change Lord's decision. He was injured as soon as he left the capital. What was he going to do for the rest of his journey? Ethereal wanted to discuss this with Turin and the others, but it was useless. It would only make them anxious. After thinking for a long time, his gaze fell on the closed door behind him. Suddenly, he had a flash of inspiration. Lord wouldn't listen to what they said, but there was one person who Lord wouldn't disobey. Although he didn't want to admit it, the current situation didn't allow him to be willful. So Ethereal knocked on the door. A weak voice came from inside. "Come in." Ethereal pushed the door open and walked in. He immediately saw the person lying on the bed. "Little young master, this subordinate is here to check on you." Chu Qingyan saw that it was Ethereal and smiled as she got up. "You saved my life again. Thank you." "Little young master, you're too polite. This is this subordinate's duty." Ethereal sat down on a chair in front of the bed. He placed a hand on her wrist and checked her eyes and tongue. Finally, he withdrew his hand and said a few simple words. Suddenly, he seemed to have something to say, but stopped. Chapter 195. Ethereal looked a bit strange today. He was originally indifferent to her, but why was he answering all her questions today? Now he looked like he wanted to say something. Chu Qingyan was a bit confused. Take the initiative to ask him? No way, right? What if he said she was meddling in other people's business? Ethereal was also thinking about how to open his mouth at this time. At the same time, he was also puzzled. Didn't Hualing say that the little princess was very understanding? Why was he vexed for so long, but she was just silently pretending to be dead and looking at the top of the bed? Was there anything to look at on the top of the bed? So the two of them just waited like this. In the end, Chu Qingyan couldn't take it anymore. Her patience wasn't as good as his. "Ethereal, do you have something to say to me?" Chu Qingyan turned to look at him. He sat there for a while without saying anything. She used her toes to guess that he really did have something to talk to her about. Ethereal nodded when he heard this. Chu Qingyan helplessly rolled her eyes at the top of the bed. "Big Ice Cube, oh big Ice Cube, your subordinates are either as noisy as Hualing, or as coquettish as Turin, or as crazy as Mu Ling, all right. Now there's another taciturn. If you don't knock him, he won't open his mouth. Why are all your subordinates so strange?" Unspeak, Chu Qingyan had already prepared her heart. This person didn't like her getting close to the big ice cube. Maybe he wanted to persuade her to return to the capital, so she wouldn't be a burden to the big ice cube. Only, when Ethereal opened his mouth, she was stunned. "Little young master was injured last night." This subordinate wanted to take a look at his injuries, but Master said it was fine and didn't allow this subordinate to take a look. This subordinate is a bit worried. Ethereal sighed softly. Chu Qingyan frowned and struggled to sit up. Her injuries hurt a bit, but she couldn't care too much right now. What did you say? His Highness is injured? Yes. After the fight with the black-clothed man last night, Master's complexion seemed a little off. I reckon that he suffered some internal injuries, Ethereal said slowly as he recalled the scene last night. If he's sick, he needs to be treated. If he's injured, he needs to be treated. You have to take a look at him. If a small injury becomes a big one, it will be dangerous. Chu Qingyan immediately said. The big ice cube was actually injured. Why didn't she notice it just now? She blamed herself for being too careless. However, she couldn't be blamed. Xiao Su didn't show any signs of discomfort. If it wasn't for Ethereal seeing his expression last night, no one would have known that he was injured. Ethereal shook his head and smiled bitterly. It's not that this subordinate doesn't want to check on Master's injuries. It's just that Master refuses to talk about this matter. This subordinate has no choice but to look for young Master. Chu Qingyan pointed at herself with a headache. Are you saying that I can persuade His Highness? Ethereal smiled embarrassedly. Apart from you, this subordinate can't think of anyone else who can persuade Master. Chu Qingyan recalled his attitude towards her in the past. Now, he was lowering his voice and asking for her help. She felt a little emotional. She knew that the people under the big ice cube all had their own areas of expertise. That was why they all had a faint air of arrogance. Among these people, Ethereal gave her the strongest feeling. But now, he was willing to lower his head and ask for her help for the big ice cube. Chu Qingyan couldn't help but admit that these people were absolutely loyal to the big ice cube. What about the retired emperor? Chu Qingyan asked. Ethereal shook his head. Although Master respects the retired emperor, even the retired emperor can't change his decision. Chu Qingyan couldn't help but feel even more surprised. Then why do you think that I can change His Highness' mind? The retired emperor could be said to be the person closest to the big ice cube other than the Sichuan emperor. If even the retired emperor couldn't change his mind, then what right did she, who had joined halfway, have to say anything? Ethereal slowly raised his head and looked at the dazed young girl in front of him. His gaze slowly turned resolute. If even you can't persuade him, then this subordinate can't find a second person. Chu Qingyan felt that Ethereal had given her too much credit. She knew her own limits. To the big ice cube, she was just a child in his hands. She was like a little sister to him. He could do whatever he wanted with her, but when it came to matters that involved his bottom line, he wouldn't back down at all. But no matter what, the big ice cube really made her angry. How could someone who didn't cherish himself take good care of himself in the future? He wasn't a 3 or 4-year-old child. Ethereal asked Xining to come in. Chu Qingyan said. Ethereal's eyes brightened when he heard this. Thank you, young Master. When Ethereal got up to leave, Chu Qingyan stopped him. Ethereal, thank you for reminding me that there's something wrong with His Highness' health. But I'm not doing this for your sake. It's because I'm just as concerned about His Highness as you are. This subordinate understands. Ethereal looked deeply at her, then turned and left. After he asked Xining to go in, Ethereal looked at the tightly shut door and sighed softly in his heart. If you asked him why he felt that only the young princess could change his master's mind, and no one else could do it, he was afraid that he wouldn't be able to answer that question. He could only say that perhaps the young princess had already become a special existence in his master's heart. This was a recognition that he couldn't deny. He wasn't completely convinced of the young princess's identity. His prejudice against her still existed. But at this time, the two of them could only shake hands and make peace and fight together. The young princess was very smart. She had also seen this point, which was why she said those words when he left. He suddenly realized that the young princess wasn't as immature as other 10-year-old children. On the contrary, she was very intelligent. His prejudice against her seemed to have lessened a little. But no matter what, he hoped that the young princess would succeed. Xining was brewing medicine when she was summoned. She asked in confusion, Master, why are you looking for this servant? When His Highness is rested, go and tell him that I have something urgent to talk to him about. Chu Qingyan instructed. Xining was a little confused. His Highness had only left not long ago. Why was Master already missing His Highness? Could it be that it was like what outsiders said, One day apart felt like 3 years, and 2 hours apart felt like several days. Xining didn't ask any more questions and agreed. After Xining left, Chu Qingyan lay on the bed and began to ponder how she should persuade Big Ice Cube if he came later. He couldn't even persuade his confidant. So could she really? After Xiao Su got up, he heard someone knocking on the door. He said, "Come in." Xining carefully pushed open the door and walked in. When Xiao Su saw that it was Xining, he immediately frowned. "What's wrong with your master?" Xining shook her head repeatedly. "Master is fine, but Master wants to see your highness now." Chapter 196. Upon hearing Xining's words, Xiao Su did not delay and immediately went to Chu Qingyan's room. When he saw that she was lying on the bed unscathed and playing with the knot, he finally relaxed and slowly walked over. Instead of resting properly, "Why are you looking for this, prince?" When Chu Qingyan heard this, she grabbed the knot in her hand and patted the bed beside her with a smile. Unfortunately, she was thinking about something and forgot about her injury. Then, she grimaced in pain as she gasped for air. Xiao Su was helpless against her and sighed. "Can't you pay more attention to yourself?" Chu Qingyan also sighed. "We're about the same. There's not much difference between us." However, she only dared to say this in her heart and did not dare to say it out loud. "Didn't I forget?" Chu Qingyan slowed down, trying to let the pain go away. Xiao Su sat down beside her bed and said with raised brows, "Speak. Why are you looking for this, prince?" When Chu Qingyan heard this, she protested. "Could it be that I can only look for you if I need something, but I can't chat with you if I don't need anything?" Xiao Su frowned, which was a rare sight. "This prince thinks that you're the one who's itching for a beating." Chu Qingyan chuckled and smashed the pot to pieces. All right, go ahead and hit me. Let's see if you can't bear to hit me. Or should I say, do you have the heart to bully an injured person? Why is this little fellow becoming more and more shameless? Just a little bit of color, and she's really going to open up a dye house. Xiao Su did not plan to pay attention to her and prepared to get up. However, the moment he stood up, he felt his clothes being tugged. He didn't need to think to know who it was. "Big Ice Cube, I just want to talk to you." Chu Qingyan suddenly lowered her voice. Xiao Su, who had wanted to pull her hand away, put it down when he heard this. He turned around and sat down again. He wanted to see what this little fellow was up to this time. Seeing that he had compromised, Chu Qingyan cheered in her heart. She had taken the first step in a long journey. "What do you want to say?" Xiao Su went straight to the point. Chu Qingyan rolled her eyes and said, "Big Ice Cube, how about I tell you a story?" Xiao Su's face darkened and was about to stand up again when Chu Qingyan immediately covered her shoulder and groaned. "The wound hurts. It hurts." Xiao Su sighed deeply. He reached out to hold her uninjured shoulder and asked, "Did you pull on your wound? Let this prince take a look." Seeing that he was really going to check on her, Chu Qingyan immediately waved her hand to stop him. Okay, it doesn't hurt anymore." Xiao Su looked at her suspiciously. "It really doesn't hurt." Chu Qingyan immediately nodded. Xiao Su retracted his hand and said indifferently, "This prince was the one who took care of your wounds. If you still feel uncomfortable, tell this prince, and this prince will help you change your dressing." Like a bolt from the blue, Chu Qingyan felt as if she had been struck by lightning. Was this Lord of the Lord very free? Why was it that he was the one who bandaged her every time she got injured? No wonder she felt that the bandaging method this time was so familiar. The truth was that it was the original recipe, the original smell. "Tell me, what story do you want to tell?" Xiao Su felt that if he didn't let her continue, he wouldn't be able to have a peaceful afternoon. Chu Qingyan hurriedly collected her emotions and got down to business. "The story I want to tell is from my own experience." Xiao Su nodded, looking like he was willing to listen to the details. Sensing that the big ice cube didn't seem to be interested at all, Chu Qingyan took a deep breath and didn't argue with him. Then she slowly began to speak. "When I was very young, it should be the first time my teeth changed. Because I like to eat sweets, I was very lazy after eating sweets, so I didn't brush my teeth. Brushing your teeth means to clean your teeth. Later on, a black spot appeared on one of my teeth." Xiao Su raised his eyebrows when he heard this. What was this little fellow talking about? Xining cursed in her heart. What the hell was Master talking about? Something was clearly wrong. Ignoring the expressions of everyone present, Chu Qingyan continued. At first, when I looked in the mirror, I thought that it shouldn't be a problem. It was just a black spot. I would just brush my teeth at night, and it would be fine. Then, after a few days, the black spot showed signs of expanding. I wasn't worried and continued to eat my sweets. After a while, I found that whenever I used the teeth on the other side to eat or eat sweets, that tooth would faintly hurt. But I still didn't take it to heart and continued to eat my sweets and brush my teeth. But Chu Qingyan's expression suddenly became sorrowful and indignant. Finally, one day, that tooth hurt so much that I couldn't eat. My mother, oh, it was my mother, asked me what was wrong. I opened my mouth to show her. She got a fright and said that my tooth was decayed. She immediately took me to see a doctor, that is, a doctor. The doctor told me to look in the mirror. When I looked, there was actually a big hole in that tooth. Later on, that tooth was pulled out. It hurt so much that I couldn't eat properly for several days. As Chu Qingyan spoke, she covered her face. Although she had changed her body, she still couldn't forget that painful feeling from back then. After Xiao Su finished listening, he reached out and lifted her chin. Open your mouth and let this prince see. Chu Qingyan immediately grabbed his hand and coughed lightly to cover it up. At that time, it was still a baby tooth. Now it has already grown new teeth. When Xiao Su heard this, he relaxed and withdrew his hand. He looked at her with an amused expression. Then why are you telling this to this prince? Could it be that you want this prince to take good care of his teeth? Chu Qingyan shook her head and then nodded. Not all of it. I'm mainly telling you. Her eyes were calm, but there was a faint layer of worry in them. If your body has a small illness or injury, you can't not take it to heart. Because what if there comes a day when it threatens your health? When Chu Qingyan's voice fell, Xiao Su instantly put away all his emotions and sharply looked at her. It seems like there's a hidden meaning in your words. This wasn't a question, but an affirmation. Chu Qingyan brushed her hair. Big Ice Cube was so sensitive that he could sense it, as expected of a divine general who used soldiers. But she didn't deny it. Big Ice Cube, I actually want to tell you that if you're sick or injured, you have to get treatment immediately. Otherwise, it will snowball and get worse and worse. Xiao Su's cold eyes swept over, and Chu Qingyan instantly felt the surrounding air freeze, the temperature dropping. Chu Qingyan resisted the pressure in his eyes and fearlessly said, Big Ice Cube, if you don't want to listen, I have another story to share with you. It's about hiding one's illness for fear of treatment. There was a famous doctor called Bien Quebec. The first time he met Duke Huan, he said, Enough. You don't need to worry about this prince's matters. You just need to take care of yourself, and you won't cause trouble for this prince. Xiao Su stood up. He no longer had the gentle expression from before, and his tone was as cold as before. Chu Qingyan was frightened by Xiao Su's coldness. She couldn't help but admit that her heart was filled with jealousy because of what he had said. Big Ice Cube, I'm not worrying for nothing. I'm just worried about you. No need. You just need to take care of yourself. Xiao Su calmed his emotions, but his tone was still cold. Chapter 197. If you refuse to listen to my advice, then you don't need to worry about me either. Chu Qingyan felt wronged as she shouted at him. She then turned her head to the side. Xining, from today onwards, I'm not eating. You don't have to bring food into the room. Ah! Xining didn't know what was going on. The two of them were clearly getting along fine. So why did they suddenly start arguing? Lord, this Xining was in a difficult position. Let her be. Xiao Su was about to leave the room. Chu Qingyan immediately blurted out, Xiao Su, stop right there. Xiao Su turned around. His eyes filled with an unreadable emotion. You dare to call this prince's name directly? Chu Qingyan didn't dare to look him in the eye, guessing that he was definitely angry right now. She lowered her head and tugged at her knot as she said in a fit of pique, Isn't a name meant to be called? Otherwise, why would you give it a name? Xiao Su flung his sleeves. You actually learned how to twist words and force logic. Fine, you don't want to eat. Fine, Xining. I'll starve her for a day first. This prince wants to see how long you can be stubborn for." Hearing his tone, he was clearly angry. This was the first time he had been so fierce to her, but now wasn't the time to be angry. Seeing that he was about to leave from the corner of her eye, Chu Qingyan was as anxious as an ant on a hot pan. Her shoulder was faintly hurting from the heaving of her breathing. Her eyes lit up, and she placed her right hand on her left shoulder. Then she closed her eyes and pressed hard. "Master, your wound is split open." Xining, who had been paying attention to her master's every move, immediately called out when she saw this scene. Chu Qingyan's face was pale, but she gave her a look of praise. As expected of her subordinate, so quick-witted, Xiao Su, who had just stepped out of the room, turned around and walked back in large strides. When he returned to the front of the bed, he saw that the blood on the little fellow's left shoulder had already soaked the white inner clothes, and red flowers bloomed on the snow-white skin. He frowned and sat down. He shifted the person on the bed into his arms and said to Xining, who was still in a daze, "Medicine and gauze." Xining immediately took it over when she heard that. Xiao Su wanted to take off her clothes, but was caught by her hand. "Qingyan, this is not the time to be willful." Xiao Su stared coldly at the bloodless face in front of him, his tone as cold as ice. Chu Qingyan shook her head. "A crooked stick will have a crooked shadow. You can be willful, but why can't I be willful?" She said each word with great difficulty, almost as if she was in pain. "Qingyan, don't think that you can threaten this prince." Xiao Su suppressed his anger. "Then can I threaten you?" she asked with a curious expression, as if she was a studious student. Xiao Su clenched his fists and looked at her bright eyes, but he couldn't say that he couldn't. Chu Qingyan waited for a while, but he didn't answer. She had an answer in her heart. She was a little happy, but also a little bitter. "Big Ice Cube, if you want me to bandage your wound again, I can, as long as you let Ethereal take a look at your injury." "You." Xiao Su looked at her with a gaze as sharp as a sword, but what met his gaze was her lack of fear. This wasn't the first time that someone had threatened him with an exchange, but it was the first time that he couldn't resolutely refuse someone's threat. It was him who gave her the ability to make him give in. Feeling his hesitation, Chu Qingyan let go of his wrist and grabbed his finger. Her tone changed, no longer being as hard as before. She said in a soft voice, "Big Ice Cube, I'm not forcing you, but I'm very worried about you." Xiao Su looked deeply at her. The blood on his shoulder bloomed bit by bit, but she didn't care at all. Her pale face was so transparent that he could see the veins under her skin. Her expression was weak, but it was filled with stubbornness. She was going through so much trouble for him, willing to tear her wound open just to receive a nod from him. "Little fellow, how can this king be at ease letting you live alone in this world?" Perhaps it was because Xiao Su had been silent for too long that Chu Qingyan's heart began to feel uneasy. Would the Big Ice Cube agree? At this time, Xiao Su turned to the stunned Xining on the side and said, "Have Ethereal come over." Xining happily complied when she heard this and quickly ran out of the room. Chu Qingyan let out a sigh of relief and her body relaxed, but she couldn't help coughing. Xiao Su sighed softly and reached out to soothe her. You reap what you sow." "I reap what I sow, but it's not as bad as you hiding your illness for fear of treatment." When he looked over, Chu Qingyan immediately changed her words. "Oh, no. I reap what I sow. Reap what I sow." When she finished speaking, Chu Qingyan was a little annoyed. Why was she so disappointing? Ethereal was already waiting in the room. When she saw Xining summon her, she immediately followed her out. When she entered the room, she saw Chu Qingyan lying on the bed with her wound open, and her master sitting by the bed. She was puzzled. What was going on? "Let's take a look at her wound first. Let's examine her body first," the two of them said in unison. Xiao Su frowned. Chu Qingyan immediately took the opportunity to say, "Anyway, we've already agreed that if you don't examine her, I won't bandage her wound." Xiao Su glanced at her, and I didn't want to argue with her anymore. If he delayed any longer, she might lose too much blood. Thus, he got up and sat on the chair, extending his wrist. Ethereal was overjoyed when she saw this. She walked forward and placed her hand on his pulse, holding her breath with rapt attention. Chu Qingyan leaned against the bed wall and looked at them without blinking, waiting for Ethereal's diagnosis and treatment results. Ethereal's expression changed from the initial calmness to shock, and then to pain. Chu Qingyan couldn't help but feel her heart clench. Ethereal, how is His Highness's body? Chu Qingyan hurriedly asked when she saw him withdraw his hand. Master's internal organs are damaged. His qi and blood are in a mess, and 30% of his internal energy is destroyed. If he doesn't recuperate well, I'm afraid that the accumulated blood clots will block his meridians and cause his blood to be unable to flow freely. In the end, he didn't expect that his master's injuries were more serious than he had imagined. Fortunately, the young princess consort had convinced him. Otherwise, the consequences would have been unimaginable. Then what can we do? Chu Qingyan's heart was already in a knot. For the next period of time, Master can't use force. This subordinate will write a prescription for Master and pair it with a tranquilizing pill. After drinking it for a period of time, he will recover completely. But this period of time would take at least 3 months. Good. As long as he can recuperate, that's good. Xining, quickly boil the medicine for His Highness. Chu Qingyan immediately said to Xining. Thus, Ethereal left with Xining. At this time, Xiao Su stood up and returned to the side of the bed. He looked at her. Can you treat the injury on your shoulder now? Chu Qingyan's heart was in a mess. Seeing him act as if nothing had happened, she felt even more upset. Why didn't this person care about her at all? Her injuries were already so serious, yet he still wanted to bandage them for her. Xiao Su saw that she was silent. He took the medicine and gauze and helped her take off her clothes to her shoulders. He gently undid the gauze that was already soaked in blood. His brows were tightly furrowed and didn't loosen. After Xiao Su finished treating her wounds, the moment he helped her pull up her clothes, pea-sized hot tears hit the back of his hand. He was slightly startled and immediately asked, "Does it hurt a lot?" Chu Qingyan reached out and hugged him. She buried her head in his embrace and shook her head. Big ice cube, so you're not omnipotent. You can also get hurt and feel pain. Chapter 198. I thought that leaning against a big tree would be nice, but I never thought that there would be a day when a big tree would encounter a storm and he would also be injured. Was I too confident, or was I deceiving myself? Faced with the little fellow's sudden dependence and sadness, Xiao Su was a bit helpless. In the end, he could only reach out to stroke her back and silently accompany her, dispelling the sadness in her heart. Big Ice Cube, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to force you. I was just worried about you. She tightly grabbed his clothes as she apologized. Xiao Su stroked her back from time to time. Big Ice Cube, can you promise me that if you get injured in the future, you won't shoulder it by yourself? She tried to persuade him. His fingers paused, and after a while, he put them down again. Chu Qingyan let out a sigh of relief and continued. You have to cherish yourself. If you don't even treat yourself well, who will cherish you? Xiao Su suddenly felt that it was funny. Was this little guy teaching him how to conduct himself in society? If there's anything sad, you can tell me. Even if I can't help you solve it, I can share the pain with you. Chu Qingyan continued to ramble on. But in the end, she did not hear his reply. She struggled to get up, but she was pressed into his embrace. You're still young, and your shoulders are too weak. It's better if this king does it alone. Chu Qingyan pursed her lips when she heard this. How was she young? Wasn't she just a bit short? How was she weak? Wasn't she just not strong enough? Have a good rest. Don't worry about anything else. Just take care of yourself and save this king some trouble. Xiao Su lightly said. But your injuries? Chu Qingyan was a bit worried. With Ethereal here, what do you have to worry about? Go to sleep. You've already been tormented for an entire day. Xiao Su cut her off, not allowing her to explain. Chu Qingyan felt that she had challenged his bottom line today, and it was time to stop while she was ahead. Moreover, she was basically holding onto her energy, and her body couldn't take it anymore. Thus, she obediently nodded, found a comfortable position in his arms, and then fell asleep. Xiao Su looked at the little fellow, sleeping peacefully in his arms, his eyes flashing with a myriad of complex emotions. Ever since he left the capital, he no longer cared so much about his own body. But this little girl always used her own way to remind him again and again of her special place in his heart, making him unable to give up. After placing her on the bed and pulling up the blanket, Xiao Su turned around and left. After leaving the room, a subordinate went upstairs to report, "Master, Lord Huoling is back." Hearing that, Xiao Su went downstairs and saw Huoling's group. Huoling and the others were more or less injured. When they saw their lord coming downstairs, they immediately went up to greet him. Huoling said with some annoyance, "Master, we lost track of them. Those black-clothed men are really good at hiding. After leaving this forest, they disappeared." Xiao Su walked to the center of the lobby and sat down. Looking at the slightly tired guards after last night's fierce battle, he said to Huoling, "Since they came once, there will be a second time. Don't be in a hurry to track them down. Go and rest first. Let Turin's men take the place of the guards." Huoling and Turin immediately complied. This inn was already ownerless, so Xiao Su used it as a temporary residence. The guards each had their own duties, standing guard and patrolling in an orderly manner. Su Jian, who was sitting on the other side, couldn't help but feel a faint admiration when he saw this. It was rumored that His Royal Highness was good at managing the army, and it was indeed true. "Grandmaster, why have you appeared here?" Xiao Su saw Su Jian and ordered someone to pour tea for him. Su Jian smiled and replied, "A few days ago, my master's good friend asked me to search for a family member who has been missing for a long time. Now that I've arrived here, I just so happened to run into you all who saw through their trap and saved almsgiver Chu." "I see." Xiao Su nodded. "Have you found the missing people?" "I'm afraid they've already been killed by this inn." Su Jian closed his eyes and put his palms together, saying Amitabha. At this time, Turin walked out from the inner courtyard and reported to Xiao Su with a serious expression, "Master, the three demons of heaven, earth, and man have confessed to killing the travelers. This subordinate has been identified by them and found the dismembered corpses in the small storeroom. The other travelers have already been. Even though the earth spirit was used to seeing life and death, it was still shocked by this extremely vicious and cruel method. Now, it was completely enraged. Amitabha, good indeed, Ethereal chanted with his eyes closed. Hand these three people and their crimes to the local authorities. Confirm the identities of all the victims and have the authorities help find their families," Xiao Su said coldly. "Yes." Turin obeyed the order and left. When the hall was quiet again, the people upstairs came down the stairs with a bang, 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 bang sound. "What a good sleep." The retired emperor's voice came from afar. When he saw Su Jian downstairs, he was stunned. "Su Jian, why are you here?" Su Jian nodded at him and repeated what he had said to Xiao Su. Then he asked, "Retired emperor, have you seen this humble monk's martial uncle?" His martial uncle had a good relationship with the retired emperor many years ago. A few years ago, he had traveled with the retired emperor and never returned to the temple. The disciples had been looking for him for a long time, but there was no news of him. "I haven't seen him since we parted ways in Luoyang. Perhaps he's roaming the world again," the retired emperor said with a wave of his hand. The retired emperor waved his hand. However, after he finished speaking, he felt his grandson's gaze on him. He immediately lowered his head guiltily. His engagement with Yin Las was the result of his discussion with Su Jian's martial uncle. But when he walked down the stairs, he realized something was wrong. He turned and asked, "Su where's Yin Las? Why don't I see her?" "She's injured and resting in her room," Xiao Su said indifferently as he sipped his tea. "Injured? Is it serious?" the retired emperor immediately asked. When the retired emperor asked this, Su Jian paused and looked at Xiao Su, waiting for his answer. "It's not serious. She'll be fine after a few days of rest," Xiao Su said. That's good. Otherwise, no one will make pastries for me." Turin, who was in the middle of making arrangements, was speechless. Fortunately, the young princess consort wasn't here. Otherwise, she would probably explode in anger. The retired emperor, who forgot about his granddaughter-in-law when there was food to eat. Su Jian twirled his Buddhist prayer beads as he thought to himself. The injury looked serious, but with the abilities of Xiao Su's subordinates, it wouldn't be a problem to treat it, so he was relieved. By the way, old master, I haven't asked you yet. How come you didn't know about such a major incident? Mu Ling asked in confusion. As soon as he finished speaking, Xiao Su also turned to look at him. The retired emperor felt even more pressured. He stammered, not knowing what to say. Was he supposed to tell them that he stole wine from the kitchen and drank himself unconscious? Xining, who was walking past the retired emperor, wrinkled her nose. Why do I smell alcohol? Everyone looked at the retired emperor with a look of sudden realization. The retired emperor immediately glared back. What? You don't allow people to drink. Everyone couldn't help but laugh. Chapter 199. The rain had yet to stop, so Su Jian stayed at the inn for the time being. Chu Qingyin slept for a day and a night. After she had her fill, she looked much better. On this day, Su Jian came to visit. Chu Qingyin asked Xining to take a seat. Reverend, I didn't think you'd come to visit Qingyin. Almsgiver Chu is too polite. Su Jian smiled. How are your injuries? The wound is already forming a scab, so it shouldn't be a big problem. Chu Qingyin also smiled, then said half-jokingly, Reverend, you've already saved me 3 times. Qingyin doesn't know how to thank you. If you need any help in the future, feel free to ask. If Qingyin can do it, I'll do my best to help. She thought that if she couldn't do it, there was still big ice, so there was nothing to be afraid of. Su Jian smiled. Almsgiver Chu, don't worry. It's just fate. This poor monk happens to meet you every time. If it were anyone else, they would have done the same. Chu Qingyin used to think that this person was strange and naggy. He always liked to talk about Buddhist principles to her and always liked to persuade her to become a monk. Now that she saw him sitting there humbly with a peaceful gaze, she couldn't help but feel at peace with him. It was a fact that this person had saved her. Even if he didn't accept her kindness, she could return the favor in the future if she had the ability to do so. Reverend, I've heard about your situation from Xining and the others. Where are you going next? Chu Qingyin asked curiously. We monks don't have a fixed residence. The world is our home. The first step out of the temple is the beginning of experience. Life is like a sea of suffering. The responsibility of us Buddhist disciples is to save the people from the abyss of suffering. His hands were clasped together tightly and firmly. His gentle gaze was sincere and solemn. Chu Qingyin frowned slightly. Reverend, you're not going to guide me into Buddhism again? Take me in as your disciple? Su Jian smiled. No need. Let nature take its course. If many hardships can be predicted through divination and then stopped, then a calamity wouldn't be a calamity. Chu Qingyin frowned. What was this person mumbling about? Why couldn't she understand a single word? However, she could still understand his intention of persuading her to give up on shaving her head and becoming a monk. Seeing her confused look, Su Jian sighed in his heart. She didn't need to understand. As long as she lived according to her thoughts, he could only do his best, no matter what happened in the future. By the way, these are the Buddha beads that I consecrated in the temple. If you don't mind, you can accept them. Su Jian took out a string of ebony Buddhist beads from his sleeve. It was formed by connecting a peanut-sized bead with 20 to 30 beads the size of soybeans. It was round and simple. Chu Qingyin liked it very much when she saw it. However, Chu Qingyin did not accept it. Instead, she blinked and looked at him. Why are you giving me such an expensive gift? These ebony Buddhist beads can keep you safe. You and I are fated, so I'll give it to you as a meeting gift. Moreover, these ebony Buddhist beads are not expensive. Su Jian placed the beads in her hand. Chu Qingyin saw that he had already placed it in front of her and was too embarrassed to refuse. She accepted it graciously. Thank you, great master. A single ebony Buddhist bead was indeed not expensive, but a bracelet of Buddhist beads could not be described as expensive. Moreover, to be able to be personally consecrated by the revered great Master Su Jian was a blessing that everyone could only wish for. After Su Jian left, Xining came up to take a look. She enviously asked in confusion, "Master, why is great Master Su Jian so good to you? Perhaps he feels that I'm fated with Buddha." Chu Qingyin recalled the few times she had met him. Almost all of them had been in danger, and he had said that only by entering Buddhism would she be able to live a peaceful life. Perhaps he wants to take me as his disciple, so he used this string of Buddhist beads to bribe me. Chu Qingyin couldn't help but laugh. Xining also couldn't help but laugh. The master and servant no longer harped on this matter. That's right. What is His Highness doing today? She hadn't seen Big Ice Cube's figure for a long time, so she really missed him. Xining shook her head. This servant was brewing medicine for Master today and didn't notice. Chu Qingyin was about to ask her to go see where Big Ice Cube was when she suddenly saw a white head appear at the door. She curled her lips, crossed her arms, and harumphed. "Don't hide, I saw you." Thus, when the person hiding at the door heard her, he rubbed his head and put his hands on his hips. He said fiercely, "Who's hiding? Who's hiding? I was looking at it openly." Chu Qingyin didn't want to argue with him. "Speak. Why are you looking for me? Do you feel apologetic in your heart?" Hearing this, the Emperor Emeritus was deflated. He found a chair and sat down. He coughed lightly and said, "Yin lass, I thought that after 2 days, your anger would have subsided. I didn't expect you to still be thinking about it." His expression was saying, "Why are you so petty?" Chu Qingyin shot a glance at him and harumphed coldly. "Grandfather, who wouldn't be thinking about it? If no one came to save her grandfather, the person lying in front of you would be a corpse." Oh, don't say any more. It's all my fault. I shouldn't have drunk so much that I couldn't wake up." The Emperor Emeritus raised his hands in surrender. He didn't know that because he accidentally got drunk, the innkeeper colluded with the men in black to plot against him, causing Yin Lass to be kidnapped. At that time, Xiao Su thought that his grandfather was upstairs, so he only sent Qing Yi to protect the little fellow. He didn't expect that the Emperor Emeritus had already gone to see Zhou Gong, panting heavily. Chu Qingyin was actually just teasing the Emperor Emeritus and didn't really want to blame him. Fortunately, he didn't appear. Otherwise, those people were highly skilled in martial arts. What if old Master Yin accidentally got injured? An elderly person's body was much weaker than a young person's. Fortunately, Qing Yi only suffered some external injuries and I'm fine. Then this matter is over. Chu Qingyin generously waved her hand. When the Emperor Emeritus heard this, he immediately returned to his usual well-dressed appearance, sweeping away his previous demeanor of a little wife. "That's right, Yin Lass, is Su injured?" Chu Qingyin was slightly surprised. "How did you know?" Although the Ice Cube didn't order the news to be sealed, no one dared to mention it to the Emperor Emeritus. "That's because I have a pair of fiery eyes." The Emperor Emeritus stroked his beard complacently. In fact, he only had a guess because he saw LV take out the medicine bowl from Suer's room. Seeing Chu Qingyin's reaction, he confirmed this guess. Chu Qingyin obviously didn't believe it, but since the Emperor Emeritus already knew, she didn't hide it and told him about her injuries from the fight with the man in black. When he heard that his grandson had resisted the ethereal examination, the Emperor Emeritus, who had always been sloppy, suddenly calmed down, as if he had recovered the appearance of an elder. He sighed softly at Chu Qingyin. "Yin Lass, do you know why Su acted this way?" Chapter 200. You know? Chu Qingyin hadn't recovered from the Emperor Emeritus's sudden change in attitude, but when she heard his question, she immediately became spirited. The Emperor Emeritus glanced at her and suddenly kept her in suspense. "Beg me, old urchin." Chu Qingyin silently cursed him in her heart, but she forced a smile and fawned over him. "I beg you, grandfather." "Grandfather, you're the best." The Emperor Emeritus nodded in satisfaction. "Good girl." However, he suddenly raised a finger. "How can words represent sincerity?" Chu Qingyin silently cursed him again. Looting a burning house. Looking at the Emperor Emeritus's shaking finger, she thought for a moment and said, 1 plate of pastries. No, 10 plates. The Emperor Emeritus retracted his finger, unperturbed. Chu Qingyin took a deep breath and told herself that it was worth it for the big ice cube. In the end, she gritted her teeth and nodded. Deal. The Emperor Emeritus smiled triumphantly, but in the blink of an eye, he resumed his solemn and dignified appearance of an elder. Chu Qingyin blushed with shame. His ability to change his expression was too strong. Yin lass, I feel that seems to be sad. What do you mean? Chu Qingyin was at a loss. His imperial father went too far this time. The Emperor Emeritus faintly sighed. If this continues, I'm afraid that Su will be crushed by the burden in his heart. Grandfather, don't speak half-heartedly. I don't understand. Chu Qingyin was a bit anxious. The Emperor Emeritus's words seemed to be very serious. What did he mean by the burden in his heart? What did he mean by crushed? Could he not speak in riddles like this? Her little brain still hadn't figured it out. The retired emperor looked pitifully at Chu Qingyin, whose head was about to explode. He shook his head and said, Did you really think that leaving the capital this time was just a simple search for ores? No, the truth is far more than that. Could it be that this, or hunt, is very dangerous? Or is there another mission besides, or hunting? Chu Qingyin immediately reacted, and her tone was unusually serious. The retired emperor smiled when he saw that she had keenly hit the nail on the head. She was indeed worthy of being the person he had chosen. She wouldn't be too stupid, but I can only reveal this much. Unless Su is willing to tell you, you can only find the answer yourself. The retired emperor stood up. He had already revealed too much today. Originally, he only needed to watch from the sidelines. But now, many things had gone off the rails. He needed to come out and give some guidance. Chu Qingyin felt that this retired emperor really made people gnash their teeth in anger. Every time he said something important, she had to guess. Did he really think that she was a roundworm in his stomach and could guess everything? However, retired emperor did not pay attention to her resentful expression. He pointed a finger at her and then swayed out of the door. Chu Qingyin could only pull the quilt and sulk. Could it be that Sichuan Emperor had given Big Ice Cube something else? What was it that could make the retired emperor so disappointed in his son? Why didn't Big Ice Cube tell him? It seemed like even Hualing and the others didn't know. If I knew that things would turn out like this, perhaps I wouldn't have summoned you here. After leaving the room, retired emperor turned around to look at Chu Qingyin, who was deep in thought. He sighed deeply and hoped that fate would not play with people. He also hoped that her arrival could change Su's fate and Sichuan's fate. It seemed ridiculous to entrust everyone's fate to a little child. But who knew? Perhaps there really would be a miracle? Master, are you still thinking about what retired emperor said? After a long time, Xining saw that her master was still in a daze and couldn't help but ask. Chu Qingyin absent-mindedly nodded. Her thoughts were still drifting. Xining thought for a while and comforted her. Master, I think the retired emperor might be teasing you. Usually, 9 out of 10 of the retired emperor's words are lies, so don't take it to heart. I'm just worried. What if what he said today is the truth other than those 9 sentences? Regarding Big Ice Cube, she would rather believe 3,000 mistakes than let go of one. So, there was no what if. Xining scratched her head. Why don't you ask His Highness? Isn't it better to clarify some things in person? Chu Qingyin couldn't help but raise her hand to rub Xining's little head. If it was really that simple, I would have asked long ago. But His Highness obviously doesn't want to tell others. Look, even the fierce cavalry who has followed him for so many years, which one knows? Xining nodded. At this moment, she saw His Highness enter the room and immediately reminded the person in front of her. Master, speak of the devil. Chu Qingyin immediately raised her head and saw the person who entered the room. She said with some joy, Big Ice Cube, why are you here? Aren't you recuperating in the room? It's just a minor injury. Don't worry, Xiao Su's eyes were indifferent as he swept a glance at her face. She had already recovered some color, so he was relieved. Sigh. She didn't take her body seriously. She made it seem as if the emperor wasn't worried, but the eunuch was. Chu Qingyin pursed her lips, then asked, "That's right, big ice cube. When are we leaving this place?" "We leave tomorrow." Xiao Su sat down on the chair, his gaze coincidentally resting on the ebony bead she was playing with in her hand. His brows furrowed slightly. Chu Qingyin, who didn't notice his mood, exclaimed, "That's great. We can finally leave this damn place. The three idiots of heaven, earth, and human have turned this place into a purgatory on earth. Every time I think about how I'm sleeping on so many corpses, I feel uneasy." Xiao Su responded somewhat absent-mindedly, then asked, "Where did you get the ebony beads in your hand?" "You mean this?" Chu Qingyin raised her hand and waved the Buddhist bead necklace in her hand at him. "Master Su Jian gave it to me. He said that it's been consecrated and can keep me safe." Chu Qingyin placed the ebony beads in her palm and examined them carefully, then muttered, "Is it because every time Master Su Jian sees me, I look like I'm being hunted down? So as a Buddhist disciple with pure six senses, he can't stand it anymore, so he kindly gave me this Buddhist bead necklace." Xiao Su narrowed his eyes as he watched her play with the priceless Buddhist bead necklace, as if it were an ordinary toy. He thought to himself, Su Jian is a highly respected young holy monk in Sichuan Kingdom. It doesn't make sense that he would appear so coincidentally to save the little fellow time and time again. Seeing that Big Ice Cube suddenly stopped talking, Chu Qingyin looked up at him. She thought of the retired emperor's words and couldn't help but ask worriedly, "Big Ice Cube, are you feeling unwell anywhere? Or is he hiding something from us?" The question was on the tip of her tongue, but she didn't ask. In the future, don't casually accept things from others. Xiao Su looked in her eyes and said sternly. Chu Qingyin was a little shocked. It was rare to see Big Ice Cube so fierce. Could it be that he was jealous when he saw that she accepted Su Jian's Buddhist bead necklace? Did he feel that his position was being challenged? But she didn't seem to have said anything good about Su Jian. Chapter 201. However, no one was more important to her than the Big Ice Cube. So she nodded with a serious face. "All right, I won't casually accept people's things." As long as it wasn't casually accepted, it was fine. It was happily decided just like that. His cold eyes warmed up, and Xiao Su stood up to instruct Xining. "We'll set off tomorrow. Pack your master's things properly." "Yes." Xining stood at attention and respectfully responded. After Xiao Su left, Xining leaned over to her master's ear and whispered, "Master, don't you feel that Lord is becoming more and more like an old mother? No matter how big or small your matters are, he always worries about them?" Chu Qingyin glanced at her. "Do you dare to repeat what you just said in front of His Highness?" Xining immediately straightened up and pretended that she didn't say anything. "This servant remembers now. Master, your medicine is still on the stove. This servant will quickly go and take a look." After saying that, she ran away as if there was oil on the soles of her feet. Chu Qingyin laughed and shook her head, but after laughing, her finger lightly tapped the quilt. Although the Big Ice Cube didn't say anything, it didn't mean that she couldn't find out. She had to find out what secret mission Sichuan Emperor gave him, that even the retired emperor couldn't believe it. The next day, the sky had already cleared up. The storm of the past few days seemed to be just an illusion. Today, the sky was clear and the wind was gentle. Small droplets of water fell from the grass. Butterflies fluttered in the air, the trees were green, and the distant mountains were covered in snow. Everything was so beautiful that it made people feel comfortable. Those filthy matters had already been washed away by the heavy rain. The three devils of heaven, earth, and man had already been handed over to the government. After they left, the soldiers sealed up the inn. Chu Qingyin turned back to look at the first inn that was leaning left and right, as if a gust of wind could blow it away. Her heart was filled with sorrow. The only inn in 100-li radius actually hid so many wronged souls. She hoped that after this storm, they would be able to reincarnate and not encounter this kind of misfortune again. Chu Qingyin swept her eyes over the surrounding people, but did not see Su Fei. So she asked about Hualing. Hualing looked back at the guest room and said, Great Master Su Jian said that he wanted to help these undead find peace. So he will stay in the inn and won't travel with us. Chu Qingyin nodded and got on the carriage, heading towards the ferry. When they arrived at the ferry, Chu Qingyin saw a passenger ship that was as tall as 5 people anchored at the ferry. It was divided into 2 levels. The upper level was for people to live in, and the lower level was for luggage and carriages. The mast was upright, and the white sail had been raised. She saw Turin waving at them at a glance. Where did you get this ship? Chu Qingyin stepped on the wooden planks and lightly jumped up and down. This was her first time riding a ship. Since she was young, she had always crawled on land and rode on trains, so she was very curious about this type of transportation on the sea. This ship, this subordinate brought people to make it overnight. Because time was a bit tight, there are some places that aren't very exquisite. Little young master can just casually look around. Mu Ling was ordering people to raise the sail when she heard the little princess question. She turned around and replied, My God, this was called not exquisite? It was even painted, and the patterns on the wooden windows were carved so lifelike, but she could casually look around? It wasn't that she hadn't seen ancient ships on TV, but this ship could easily leave them in the dust. Chu Qingyin couldn't help but admire it. The people under the big ice cube were really too amazing. It was simply too amazing. But not long after she praised them in her heart, she felt miserable. Because she had never been on a ship before, she didn't know that she would get seasick. So when the ship broke through the waves, she fainted beautifully. When she opened her eyes, her head was still dizzy. Big ice cube. Where are we now? She felt that this environment was a little familiar, and it was a little small. Seeing that she was still injured, Xiao Su looked up at her. We've already crossed Jiushi River and are about to enter the city. Chu Qingyin instantly got up. She actually slept all the way across the river. She originally wanted to see the sunrise on the river. Xiao Su saw her defeated expression and couldn't help but say, Your body is too weak. You'll get sick from sitting on a ship. There are many roads on the ship, so you have to be mentally prepared. Don't be afraid. The first time is unfamiliar, but the second time is familiar. At most, I'll be fine after I get sick. This was her experience of sitting on public transport. She had a physique that made her sick on all kinds of transportation, except for 2-wheeled or 3-wheeled vehicles. Later on, she forced herself to sit on those vehicles and barely managed to deal with her sickness. Xiao Su shook his head and continued to read the secret letter in his hand. His brows were slightly furrowed. He estimated that they would have to stay in Pingyang City for a period of time this time. After entering Pingyang City, Hualing found a tea house and stopped. Chu Qingyin got off the horse carriage and couldn't stand still. Luckily, she grabbed on a big ice cube sleeve. Otherwise, she would have made a fool of herself. After getting sick from the car in the morning, she felt that her legs were weak. As expected, the after effects of seasickness were very serious. But when she felt Big Ice Cube's teasing gaze, she immediately let go of his sleeve and pretended that nothing was wrong as she looked around. This Pingyang city looked quite lively, but there seemed to be a lot of beggars on the streets. Most of them were dressed in rags, either standing or kneeling to beg. Their faces were sallow and their bodies were thin. Their clothes were ragged, and they looked very pitiful. Chu Qingyin narrowed her eyes. At this time, everyone had already entered the tea house. Under Xining's urging, she also walked in. Dear guests, where do you sit? We have seats in the main hall or in the private rooms. The waiter immediately welcomed them. Hualing replied, Prepare a private room. Just as Hualing finished speaking, Chu Qingyin shook her head and said, No, let's go to the main hall. After saying that, she found a seat in the corner and waved her hand at Xiao Su and the others. That waiter was a little hesitant, not knowing who to listen to, but that delicate-looking youth seemed to be the master. Although Hualing didn't understand why the young princess wanted to sit with these commoners, he glanced at his master. He didn't seem to have any objections, so he followed the young princess' wishes. When they sat down, Grand Emperor looked around the unusually lively main hall. He winked at Chu Qingyin and said with a smile, "I didn't think that stinky brat likes to join in on the fun like this old man." Chu Qingyin propped up her cheeks with both hands and smiled slyly. "Grandfather, I'm not doing this to join in on the fun. It's because when we want to understand a city, we just need to go to a few places to know what the city is like." "Which places? Tea houses?" Grand Emperor looked at her in a new light as he spoke in surprise. "Tea houses are one place. There are also government offices and brothels." Chu Qingyin's fingers tapped the table as she slowly said, "Because tea houses were the commoners' favorite places to chat, brothels were where people from all walks of life gathered, and government offices were where the commoners and officials interacted." Xiao Su raised a brow. How did this little fellow know so much? But when he heard her say brothels, he thought of how she suddenly disappeared last time, and his face instantly turned dark. Next time he would definitely discipline her and make her go to those places less often. And at this time, several large men near their table were whispering about something, attracting the attention of Chu Qingyin and the others. Chapter 202. Guest A. Hey, do you feel that Pingyang City is becoming more and more chaotic recently? Guest B. Yes, what do you think is going on? Children go missing every few days, and we haven't found them yet. I don't even dare to let my child out. Guest A. That's right. My neighbor's grandson, who is not even 3 years old, was sleeping soundly at home a few days ago. Once the sun rose, he disappeared. It's like seeing a ghost. Guest C. There are rumors going around that Pingyang City has offended the gods in the heavens. That's why there is such a disaster. Guests A and B chatted for a while. Then, they felt bored and left after putting down the money for their tea. Chu Qingyin and the others at the table frowned. Chu Qingyin turned and asked, "Big Ice Block, do you believe that the gods are behind this?" Zizi doesn't talk about strange forces and gods. Xiao Su held his teacup and replied nonchalantly. Chu Qingyin nodded. She didn't believe this either. The children were stolen. It must be man-made. Hey, have you all heard? Prefect Liu is going to marry his 18th concubine again. Prefect Liu is already over 60 years old. How can he still have so much energy? Guesty said mockingly. The person sitting in front of him said disapprovingly, "Didn't his 16th concubine give birth to a daughter for him not long ago? This proves that he is still vigorous despite his age." Guesty sneered. "But I don't mean to say this. Prefect Liu already has 9 daughters. Is he planning to have another one to make it perfect? Don't talk too much. If his lackeys hear this, I'm afraid you won't be able to find your teeth again." Okay. You won't even let me speak properly. I can't stay in Pingyang City any longer." Guesty shook his head and said helplessly. Hearing this, Chu Qingyin looked at the retired emperor, who was happily sipping his tea. She raised her eyebrows and said, "Grandfather, I realize that the governor of the Liu clan is quite controversial in Pingyang City. Also, TSK, an old cow eating young grass." Hearing this, the retired emperor stroked his beard. His expression didn't look too good. "This is too outrageous. When we go later, we'll scold them properly. Don't let them think too much. They didn't even do a few proper things." Chu Qingyin looked at the Grand Emperor suspiciously. "I think it's better for you not to appear. What if he offers you a few plates of pastries and you'll be roped in by him? Hey, rascal, how dare you slander me?" The Grand Emperor was so angry that he was about to stomp on his feet. At this moment, Xiao Su raised his hand to stop the two from bickering. "Let's hide our identities for now and wait and see." Chu Qingyin stopped fooling around with the retired emperor when she heard this. Her eyes darted around as she asked, "Big Ice Cube, are you planning to go incognito?" "Yes, it's convenient," Xiao Su said clearly and peacefully. Chu Qingyin felt like there was a hidden meaning in the big Ice Cube's words. She couldn't help but look at the Grand Emperor, asking him with her eyes. Unfortunately, The Grand Emperor pretended not to see her gaze and focused on his pastries. At this time, a few guests came in. They happened to pass by their table and heard what they were discussing. It'll be Governor Lu's 60th birthday in 3 days. I wonder how grand it will be this time. Those merchant officials will probably go and curry favor with him again. I also want to see it for myself. Do you think anyone can get an invitation? They have to be rich or noble. Otherwise, they won't let you in. After they left, Xiao Su ordered Hualing, get the invitation. We'll go to the banquet in 3 days. Yes. Chu Qingyin rubbed her chin. She had to see how tall and sturdy this Governor Lu was. Otherwise, these 18 concubines, chi. After the group left the tea house, they went to an inn. When they entered the city, LVE and the others were already waiting at the inn. When they came in, they could directly check in. The bustling inn didn't pay much attention to this group of unfamiliar guests. Pingyang City was close to the capital, and there were many merchants coming and going. Everyone just took a look and went about their own business. When Chu Qingyin went upstairs, she could still hear the guests downstairs discussing the things they heard in the tea house. She thought carefully. It seemed like Luing occupied all the gossip headlines in this Pingyang City. However, there were more negative comments than positive comments. She shook her head. To what extent did he have to be the gossip of all the people? Chu Qingyin went in, and Xining brought hot water for her to freshen up. She had indeed sweated a lot on the way here. It was good to freshen up. After she changed her clothes, she looked at the gauze on her shoulder and sighed slightly. It seemed that she had been here for almost a year, but there were many major and minor injuries. She really didn't know who she had offended. Just as she was sighing, someone knocked on the door. Xining went to open the door. Eldest young master. Outside, everyone addressed Xiao Su as eldest young master. Chu Qingyin heard the sound and looked at the person who walked in from the door. She smiled and said, "Big Ice Cube, why are you here?" Xiao Su, who was wearing a gauze hat, walked in front of her and put the hat on the table. He said clearly, "It's time for you to change your dressing." It was only then that Chu Qingyin saw the bandages and ointment in his hands. She swallowed her saliva and tried to negotiate. "Well, Big Ice Cube, I realize that my injuries have improved a lot recently. Why don't I change it myself? After all, I have to learn how to bandage myself in the future." Xiao Su's hand, which was putting down the gauze, paused. Hearing her last sentence, his eyes darkened. "There won't be a next time." "In the future, I won't let you have the chance to get hurt again." "What?" Chu Qingyin touched her head. What did Big Ice Cube mean? Why did he say something that didn't make sense? But just as she was in a daze, the other party had already taken off her clothes halfway to her shoulder and skillfully untied the gauze. Chu Qingyin couldn't help but cover her eyes with her hands. Forget it, forget it. She was only 10 years old, and her body hadn't fully developed yet. Why was she being so pretentious? Didn't he see Big Ice Cube's eyes looking straight ahead? He won't take advantage of us. But when she thought of this, why did she feel a little sad? She missed her body in the modern world. At least when she was in school, there were still talent scouts who wanted to poach her to be a print model. With this small body now, when would she be able to have a voluptuous and graceful figure? Just as she was daydreaming, Xiao Su had already changed the medicine for her. He raised his eyebrows when he saw her absent-minded look. Recently, this little girl seemed to be more and more able to hide things, unlike in the past where she always showed her emotions on her face. However, this was also a good thing. At least it proved that she had grown up. But he didn't allow her to hide anything from him. "What are you thinking about?" He wiped his hands with the cloth that Xining handed over. Chu Qingyin came back to her senses. From this angle, she just happened to see his delicate chin. The mask he wore today only covered his eyes and the bridge of his nose, revealing his thin, pink lips. It was like a red dot on a green tree branch in the spring wind. Chapter 203. Chu Qingyin suddenly stared blankly. She couldn't help but think, if Big Ice Block's face hadn't been burned by that fire, then what kind of beauty would he have had? His temperament was cold and lofty. His eyes were filled with starlight, as if he had gathered all the light in the world and brewed the most mellow star wine. Just a single glance was enough to make people drown in it. It wasn't the wine that made people drunk, but they themselves. Although Big Ice Block looked like a handsome man with a cold temperament and didn't smile often, his smile was enough to make people fall. She never thought that the mask on his face would cover up his brilliance. On the contrary, it was just right to cover it up, adding a mysterious charm to him. Xiao didn't hear her reply for a while, but he could feel her gaze on his face. It was hot and faintly bright. He faintly glanced at a certain someone who was still immersed in her own thoughts and coughed a few times. Chu Qingyan was immediately pulled back from her thoughts and hurriedly sat up. "Are you feeling unwell? Quickly sit down. I'll help you smooth out your breathing." Ever since she knew that he had suffered internal injuries, this little fellow would be extremely alert whenever she saw him. Her little eyes were filled with worry at the slightest movement. Xiao couldn't help but laugh. He wasn't as weak as she thought, but she had already pulled him down to sit beside the bed. "Wait, I'll help you massage." As she said that, Chu Qingyan's two little paws were already on his shoulders. She massaged him and said, "I used to minor in Chinese medicine. There was a course on how to unblock people's meridians. At that time, she was relatively lazy and didn't listen to the basic elective classes. She only studied the unblocking of meridians very seriously because during the final exam, the teacher used this as the assessment score. However, in the entire dormitory, she was the only one who impulsively chose that course. In order to not fail, she pulled the 5 people in the dormitory one by one to do the revision. In the end, she passed, and her few roommates were all pressed down by her. She couldn't bear to look back on the past, but she was incomparably glad. If it wasn't for the 3 days and 2 nights that year, her technique today wouldn't be so skillful. Xiao, who originally wanted to say that it was fine, swallowed his words when her little paws touched him. He slightly closed his eyes and enjoyed this little fellow's rare care. His skin felt comfortable to the touch and was in line with the fashion industry's evaluation of handsome men. He looked thin when he wore clothes and muscular when he took them off. He was like a moving clothes hanger. No matter what kind of clothes he wore, he could vividly display the most beautiful side of the clothes. Chu Qingyan's little paws couldn't help but poke his shoulders. His muscles were elastic and lively. She pressed on his shoulder blades. His bones were strong, and her gaze slid down his slender neck. Hidden under the luxurious clothes, his jade-like skin was like the snow of Mount Tian Shan, giving people the illusion that it would be broken by the slightest touch. She couldn't help but suck in her saliva, borrowing the water to bloom. The water is the bone, and the jade is the flesh. Suddenly, he heard the person behind him muttering to herself, and the pair of restless paws poking his body. Xiao narrowed his eyes and grabbed the pair of paws. "All right, I don't feel any discomfort anymore." Chu Qingyan reluctantly retracted her hands. Looking at the person who had stood up, an idea suddenly appeared in her mind. "Big Ice Cube, let's go to the night market tonight. I heard that Pingyang City is very lively at night. Shall we go and take a look?" Xiao instinctively wanted to reject, but he paused under her expectant gaze. During this period of time, she was injured and was mostly confined to the carriage or the room. He rarely allowed her to move around freely. It seemed that her active personality could no longer be restrained at this time. In the end, he said, "We can, but you have to bring a bodyguard." "There's no need for bodyguards. I'll bring you along. You just have to bring the money." Chu Qingyan blinked at him. "Don't you know that when you're injured or sick, you have to go out for a walk and breathe in the fresh air so that your body can recover faster?" Xiao always felt that her brain had a lot of twisted logic that was difficult to refute. Seeing that he readily agreed, she was indescribably happy. Her bright eyes darted around. "Big Ice Cube, I heard that Ethereal has superb disguise skills. You can get him to help you change your appearance. That way, You won't have to wear a gauze hat and a mask all day long and worry that your identity will be exposed. Although many people knew that they were heading north to search for ores, they kept a low profile to avoid trouble along the way and to hide their identities. However, the silver mask on Big Ice Cube's face was too recognizable. So, along the way, as long as there were outsiders, he would wear a gauze hat. She had worn a gauze hat before and felt that it was very inconvenient. Her heart ached for Big Ice Cube, so she thought of this idea. Xiao Su thought carefully and seemed to think that her idea was not bad. He nodded. Xining immediately went to summon Ethereal. Ethereal, who had rushed over as soon as he heard the news, thought that something had happened to the two's wounds. When he came in and saw that the two were sitting well, he sighed in relief and asked what was the matter. When he heard the young princess consort's idea, Ethereal expressed his approval. Chu Qingyin's eyes instantly lit up. Ethereal, quickly help your young master change his appearance. Xining, quickly help me get a chair. This young master wants to see this amazing technique. Ethereal mercilessly exposed her little thoughts. Little young master, you have an ulterior motive. This one's unique skill and cannot be exposed. So, this one asked little young master to leave. Chu Qingyin was instantly stunned. This Ethereal did not feel good because he did not oppose her, right? She just wanted to take the opportunity to see what the big ice block looked like under the mask. Even if his face was disfigured, she could at least see what his facial features looked like. Xiao Su's gaze swept over the clearly angry little fellow. He curled his lips and raised a hand to pat her little head. His voice was gentle. I'll come to pick you up at night. His tone was coaxing a child, but Chu Qingyin fell for it. She immediately waved her hand. Okay, I'll wait for you obediently. Seeing the big ice block leave, Chu Qingyin immediately stopped smiling and snorted at Ethereal. Why aren't you hurrying to change your master's appearance? Why are you standing here like a statue? Ethereal narrowed his eyes and smiled. Little young master, you'll know when it's time. Sometimes you can't force it. Chu Qingyin rolled her eyes. What was this person playing at? Was he itching for a beating? When he finished speaking, Ethereal leisurely walked towards the door. Chu Qingyin said to Xining in bewilderment, Say, the woman who takes a fancy to Ethereal in the future. What kind of unique taste do you think she will have? To be able to get along with this weirdo. I can't help but admire her courage. Ethereal, who had just walked out of the room, stumbled and a cross appeared on his forehead. Little princess consort, that's enough. He was just reminding her out of kindness, all right? Chu Qingyin and Xining were laughing so hard behind them that they could not stop. Who knew what would happen in the future? Wasn't everyone right? Chapter 204. Chu Qingyin was fidgeting in the room. Although Big Ice Cube was only in disguise and looked completely different from her real face, she still felt nervous just thinking about it. At that time, she didn't use a mask to cover her face, so her face could be seen from 360 degrees. Master, stop pacing around. Come and drink some water. Xining considerately poured her a cup of water. Chu Qingyin took the water, still looking expectant. Xining, what do you think will happen when eldest young master takes off his mask? Xining pursed her lips and looked at her master's distracted look. She couldn't help but laugh. Master, won't you find out later? Chu Qingyin thought about it and agreed. But why was she so nervous? When the room door was pushed open, Chu Qingyin immediately put down the cup and stood up to look. Xining shook her head. Why did Master look like a groom who was about to marry his bride? Full of anticipation and uneasiness, a man in luxurious black robes slowly appeared in front of her as the room door opened. The night gradually darkened, and the last rays of the setting sun penetrated the clouds and shone into the room. It also lit up Chu Qingyin's eyes. The man in front of her had eyebrows like the spring breeze in February, eyes like black jade, and an outstanding appearance. His lips were like dew-stained flower petals, lustrous and sparkling. Handsome eyebrows and slender eyes, he looked around and had an elegant temperament, forgetting all worldly things. Only that faint gaze was like the snow on a mountain, pure and cold. His skin was as white as jade, more delicate and lustrous than a woman's, making people think of sparkling and translucent jelly. She couldn't help but want to raise her finger and poke at it. A noble and famous young man, bright and spirited, enough to turn all living things upside down with just one look. Big Ice Cube. She could tell at a glance that this person was the one she had been longing for. Although she had never seen his face before, and the person in front of her had also disguised himself, she was familiar with the cold indifference on him. "Okay, I'm here to take you out." Xiao Su didn't enter the room. Instead, he stood outside with his hands behind his back, waiting for the person inside to come out. It wasn't that he didn't see the lingering amazement in her eyes, but he felt that such a silly little fellow was really losing face for him. It seemed that in the future, he would have to teach her what it meant to remain calm even if Mount Tai collapsed in front of her. If Chu Qingyin knew his unromantic thoughts, she would probably hit her head against the wall. Everyone loved beauty. This was human nature. She walked in front of him and stretched out her claws, wanted to poke his face to see if he was wearing a human skin mask. However, he stopped her halfway and grabbed her claws. "Stop fooling around." Ethereal, who had been ignored, coughed softly. "Young master, you don't have to waste your time. This human skin mask is glued together seamlessly. You won't be able to find any flaws." Chu Qingyin wasn't angry that Ethereal had exposed her thoughts. Instead, she asked him, "Does this mask resemble your master's original appearance?" Ethereal smiled but didn't answer. Chu Qingyin rolled her eyes at him, then turned to look at the person beside her. "Cousin, let's go out." "Ignore him." Oh, you're burning the bridge so quickly," Ethereal shouted behind them. Chu Qingyin turned back and rolled her eyes at him. Who told him to play riddles with her? He clearly knew that she was very concerned about Big Ice Cube's appearance, yet he used this to tease her. It was good enough that she didn't beat him up. He didn't tell the young princess consort that the reason why no one could tell that he was wearing a mask was because it was Lord's true appearance. However, he had disguised it a little and reduced his cultivation by 70%. Therefore, what the young princess consort saw was a concealed brilliance and only 30% of Lord's handsome face. 30% was enough to topple all living things. If he didn't reduce his cultivation, what kind of brilliance would he have? Kong Ling looked at the two of them walking down the stairs hand in hand and suddenly felt an inexplicable sense of coincidence. It was as if the two of them were supposed to be walking together. He couldn't help but rub his eyes. It was probably because he hadn't rested well recently that he was seeing things. "Hey, do you think that master and the little young master are a good match?" Huo Ling appeared out of nowhere with a corn cob in his mouth as he blabbered on. Kong Ling glanced at him and said, "What nonsense are you talking about? Wipe the corn off your mouth. Don't embarrass master." After saying this, Ethereal turned to enter the room and heavily closed the door. Huo Ling rubbed his nose. He was speaking the truth, so why was this person acting so awkward? At this time, he saw the waiter come up the stairs. Huo Ling immediately waved his hand at him in an attempt to understand. "Waiter brother, do you also think that my master and the little young master are a good match?" The waiter raised his hand to wipe the cold sweat on his forehead. They were both men. How could they be a good match? It couldn't be that they were good men, right? But the person in front of him was anxiously waiting for his reply. The waiter immediately tightened his clothes. These guests were a bit strange. He had to immediately tell the boss that he was sick today and needed to take the day off. Seeing the waiter rolling down the stairs in fear, Huo Ling was a bit confused. Was he really that terrifying? Ethereal has a sharp tongue, but a soft heart. You don't need to take his words to heart. Xiao Su brought her out of the inn and stood on the main street filled with people. He looked forward, and although his voice was as light as usual, it was hard to hide the gentleness in his voice. Chu Qingyin revealed a smile. I didn't take it to heart. I know that the people by your side don't like me at first, but I'm not a silver note that everyone loves, so how could everyone like me? Moreover, don't you think that conquering people is the most motivating thing? Her complete lack of care made Xiao Su curve his lips. Although this little fellow was always talking about his imperial grandfather and ethereal, she was always kind to them in her heart. She was obedient and never really argued with them. This kind of broad-minded person was Xiao Su's person. Xiao Su forgot that he wasn't wearing a mask right now. The gentle smile on his face instantly became the most dazzling scene in the crowd. Because of his faint smile, the endless stream of people slowed down their footsteps. At night, every household hung up lanterns. There were all kinds of lanterns that were beautiful beyond compare. The lanterns that snaked into the distance behind him emitted a dazzling light. It was like a brilliant firework that bloomed behind him. His black hair was tied up high and fell to his shoulders. It was as smooth as flowing water and had a faint luster to it. It was late autumn and the leaves were falling. It was unknown who bumped into the tree, but the golden leaves fell like rain. They fell on the shoulders of the two people and slid down their clothes like butterflies brushing past them. That moment of brilliance was like a falling leaf that entered the lake of people's hearts. It created ripples that spread out endlessly, layer upon layer, fine and dense. The Yu smile was like a spring breeze that blew through people's hearts. 1, 2 flowers. Chapter 205. Chu Qingyan then realized that the people walking past her seemed to have been slowed down. Every step they took seemed to have slowed down, and their gazes seemed to land on Big Ice Cube. She turned her eyes and missed the ripple at the corner of Xiao Su's mouth. However, the gentle light on his body climbed up his black, patternless clothes bit by bit. The light and shadow formed a pattern. Sometimes, the falling leaves would fall, and the pattern would become a graceful butterfly. Sometimes, the wine flag would flutter, and the pattern would become a burning flame. In this world, there was a kind of person that didn't need to be deliberately sculpted or dressed up. Even if it was ordinary coarse hemp clothes or simple wooden hairpins, it couldn't hide their noble appearance. She was a bit dazed as a strange sense of pride rose in her heart. Even if the big ice block was wearing a mask, she still felt that he was the most handsome person in the world. But the surrounding gazes that fell on them didn't have pure admiration. It made her feel a bit uncomfortable, and she couldn't help but frown. "Why do you look unhappy?" Xiao Su noticed her strange mood and asked with a lowered brow. Chu Qingyan looked up at the person in front of her. His eyes were filled with nobility and his voice and appearance were clear. How could this kind of person not attract attention? "Big Ice Block, I regret having you change your appearance. So many people are staring at you. It really makes me feel uncomfortable," she muttered in a small voice. The bustling streets were bustling with noise and excitement. Even with Xiao Su's exceptional hearing, he was unable to catch her words. He leaned forward and his black hair fell. A gust of night wind blew and his hair brushed past her face. It brought with it a clear ink fragrance. She seemed to see ink and green bamboo spread out in front of her. "What did you say just now?" His voice was as cool as the night wind, but his tone was a bit pampering. She came back to her senses, and her face suddenly became embarrassed. She was the one who wanted him to change his appearance, but now she had that kind of thought. If she said it out loud, she would be laughed at by the big ice block for being fickle. She looked at the face close by and gave a light cough. In front of such beauty, she seemed to have been bewitched. "No, nothing. I just wanted to say that this night market seems to be very big. Where are we going?" Chu Qingyan immediately laughed. Xiao Su didn't know what was going through her mind. Instead, he straightened his body. His straight and slender figure stood out among the crowd, but he didn't realize it. "Then let's take a walk. We must return to the inn before 9 o'clock. He held the little fellow's hand and slowly walked into the world of mortals. 11 o'clock? Big Ice Cube really adhered to the teaching method of children to go to bed early and get up early, and he did the same for himself. Alas, since there were still more than 2 hours left, he might as well play to his heart's content. As they had just entered Pingyang City, no one recognized them. Hence, they did not bring a single soldier or guard with them this time. Chu Qingyin saw someone selling steamed buns on the street. She hadn't eaten dinner yet and was a little hungry. She touched her body and found that she had forgotten to take her purse in a hurry. Sure enough, beauty misled people. Big ice cube, I want to eat buns. So? Xiao Su raised an eyebrow and looked at her. Hence, she stretched out her hand to the person beside her. Give me money. Xiao Su smiled when he heard that. He took out a purse from his sleeve and placed it in her hand. Chu Qingyin felt that the purse in her hand was heavy, and her eyes lit up instantly. She had only wanted to find Big Ice Cube to take a few pieces of silver, but she didn't expect him to give her the entire purse. The way Big Ice Cube handed the purse to her was too handsome. Sure enough, she was the one who brought him, and he brought the money. This feeling couldn't be any better. Why are you still in a daze? I don't have any buns on my face. Xiao Su raised his hand and waved it in front of her eyes. Was this little fellow in front of him possessed? Chu Qingyin immediately retracted her gaze and waved the purse at him. Then I'll go buy it. Xiao Su watched as she skipped happily to the bun shop to choose some buns. His gaze couldn't help but soften. Young master, your younger brother is really handsome. The old man who was selling children's toys at the side followed Xiao Su's gaze and couldn't help but say affectionately. If it was a normal day, he would rarely pay attention to him. But he nodded at this time. He's a bit naughty. Children are all like this. My family's grandson is even more naughty. He's always climbing trees to grab bird eggs and going into the river to catch fish and prawns. He always ends up dirty every time. The old man leaned against the little wooden cart. Although his words were criticizing his grandson, his face was filled with the radiance of affection. Xiao Su looked at the back figure that was seriously choosing the buns. The light in his eyes was sparkling, and there was an indescribable charm in them. This little fellow is a bit clingy, a bit talkative, and a bit greedy, but everything else is good. The old man laughed. His hand that was stroking his beard paused, and he said with a smile, I can see that as an older brother, you really love this little brother. Elder is too kind. This one is just doing his best to let him live a comfortable life without fear. The moment she moved into the prince's residence, their fates were already intertwined. She was brought into the center of the whirlpool by him, and there was too little he could do for her. Young man, this old man can see that you care a lot about this little brother. Don't worry. Your efforts will always be rewarded. When your little brother grows up, he'll understand your care and concern. The old man shook his head and smiled. Thank you, elder. Xiao Su looked up and saw the little figure that was running back in a hurry. It seemed that the little fellow had grown a lot taller in this period of time. Here, this is the red bean bun, meat bun, vegetable bun, bamboo shoot bun. Which one do you want? Chu Qingyin looked at all the buns in front of him as if she was presenting a treasure. At this time, the old man gave a muffled laugh and turned to Xiao Su. Young man, look at your little child. He's much more sensible than my grandson. He'll give you everything he is first. The corner of Xiao Su's mouth lifted slightly, a smile in his eyes. At this time, Chu Qingyin noticed the old man standing beside them and immediately handed the bun in her hand to him. Old grandpa, do you want one too? No, this old man has already eaten dinner. You two brothers can eat. The old man waved his hand. At this time, Xiao Su picked up the windmill from the old man's stall. Chu Qingyin, pay up. Oh, okay. Chu Qingyin took out some silver from her money pouch and stuffed it into the old man's hand. Old grandpa here. The old man hurriedly lowered his head to give the change. But when he looked up, the figures holding hands had already walked far away. He could only hear the two's conversation carried by the wind. Big Ice Cube, last time you were recognized as father and daughter. This time you're recognized as brother. You've improved. Eat your food properly. Don't talk when you eat. We're already walking on the streets. Don't be so picky when you eat. Big Ice Cube, try this bamboo shoot bun too. It's not bad, right? It's delicious, right? Sure enough, she was a little clingy, a little talkative, and a little greedy. The old man shook his head and laughed. Chapter 206. This was the first time she was out alone with Big Ice Cube. In the past, they were either accompanied by Gu Rong, Gu Yi, or Huo Ling and Xining. This was also the first time the two of them were walking on an unfamiliar street. She expressed her feelings to the person beside her, wanting to gain recognition. Unfortunately, Big Ice Cube was too unromantic and only looked at her lightly. Watch where you're going, don't fall. Xiao Su didn't know why this little fellow's mind was filled with so many emotions. He shook his head. I fell. A 15 or 16-year-old girl in pink walked in front of the two of them. Suddenly, she lost her footing and fell softly in front of them. She called out weakly and slowly fell down with what she thought was her most graceful figure. Chu Qingyin blinked. Why did this person fall down for no reason? Could it be that they met with a scammer? Miss, why did you fall? A girl dressed as a servant immediately ran forward and squatted down to help her up. However, the two of them fell to the ground again. The pink-clothed girl raised her eyes. Her gaze was soft and teary as she said to Xiao Su, "Young master, my maidservant is weak and can't help me up. Can you lend a hand and help me up?" This pretentious voice, coupled with the eyes that were constantly looking at the big ice cube, made Chu Qingyin realize what was going on. So they didn't meet with a scammer, but a flirt. If it was a normal day, Xiao Su wouldn't even bother with this pair of master and servant. However, there was a crowd at this time, and these two people were blocking their way. Xiao Su turned to look at Chu Qingyin beside him. Chu Qingyin received the message and sighed. She handed the two pinwheels in her hands to the person beside her, then stepped forward and asked kindly, "Miss, let me help you up." "Young master, it's not that I don't appreciate your kindness, but I'm afraid you can't help me up." The girl in pink used a handkerchief to cover her face. Her eyes drifted towards Xiao Su from time to time. The more she looked at him, the more her heart raced. This young master was really handsome. He was more masculine than any man she had seen in Pingyang City. The more she looked at him, the more she liked his cold temperament. Chu Qingyin had no choice but to turn around and shrug at Xiao Su. This young lady thinks that she's too heavy for others to help her up. "Cousin, let's let someone as strong as a bull help her up. If we accidentally cause her to fall, it'll be our fault." A smile appeared in Xiao Su's eyes, but his face was serious as he said, "You're right. We should make way for the others. Otherwise, it won't be good if we delay helping this young lady." Chu Qingyin secretly said in her heart, "It seems that this big ice block is also a black-bellied person, but usually does not show it." The girl in pink saw the two of them singing the same tune and then bypassing her to leave. She instantly clenched her fists in anger. She had really shot herself in the foot. If she had obeyed that young master, she could have taken the opportunity to talk to him now. "Miss, the two of them have left. What should we do?" The servant asked anxiously. "Let the guards check on the background of the two of them. I must see him again." The girl in pink stood up and looked at the handsome young man in black, slowly being drowned out by the crowd. Her heart was filled with indignation. She, Lu Fu, had nothing in Pingyang City that she could not get. Chu Qingyin looked at the master and servant behind her and shook her head. This kind of pickup was no longer popular now. These two were really a little silly. They were hitting on a stranger on the streets. Were they not afraid that he was a bad guy? At this moment, a few more girls looked at the big ice block with infatuated expressions. Chu Qingyin glanced at the person beside her. She still felt that it was better for the big ice block to wear a mask or a veil hat. It was not illegal to be good-looking, but it was wrong to come out and harm others. Chu Qingyin sternly clarified that it was not because she felt uncomfortable seeing other people staring at the big ice block. "There's a restaurant in front. Do you want to go in and eat?" Xiao Su looked at the spring restaurant in front and asked the person beside him. She had only eaten a few buns tonight. It was possible that she would complain that she was hungry after walking the entire street. Chu Qingyan heard him and looked forward. Her eyes instantly lit up. However, she was not looking at the restaurant, but at the glutinous rice dumpling stall opposite the restaurant. Big ice block, I want to eat glutinous rice dumplings, sesame glutinous rice dumplings, peanut glutinous rice dumplings. Chu Qingyan tugged at his sleeve and jumped up and down. She knew that the big ice block was of noble birth and was afraid that he would not be interested in the things sold by these small stalls. Aren't the Silvertails with you? Do you think I have the right to speak? Xiao Su teased. Chu Qingyan slapped her head. All right, she actually forgot. The money was with her, so the right to make the decision was with her. After thinking it through, she said proudly, I can't deny that you have the right to speak, but the decision is in my hands. Ha! Hurry up, hurry up. I'm almost drooling. With that, Chu Qingyan could not wait to run over. People came and went, and there was an endless stream of horses and carriages. Xiao Su was worried. He held her hand with one hand and helped her carry the windmill with the other. He shook his head and laughed as he walked towards the stall. A window of the restaurant opposite the stall happened to be open. Two large lanterns hung above the stall, illuminating the area around the stall. The person standing by the window immediately saw Chu Qingyan and the young man. Perhaps these two people's appearances were too outstanding. When that pair of bloated eyes saw the handsome Xiao Su dressed in black, they immediately widened. It was as if he was a vicious dog that saw a piece of bone. This person's appearance really makes one's heart itch. He could not help but sigh softly. At this time, the person sitting in the private room saw that the honored guest did not respond for a long time. He could not help but stand up and come over. When he saw the infatuated expression on the honored guest's face and the handsome and cold man under the light, he immediately understood. Lord Liu, have you taken a fancy to that man? What is Boss Xiao saying? This official is a 7-foot-tall man. How could I take a fancy to a man? Isn't this insulting this official? Lu Ying said righteously. Although he said that, he could not hide the greed in his eyes. Zhao Qing smiled in understanding. This one did not mean that. I just feel that if this person can catch Lord Lu's eye, it would be his fortune. Who doesn't know Lord Lu's identity and status? Many people dream of becoming your subordinate. Hearing this person's compliment, Lu Ying immediately beamed with joy. Boss Xiao really knows how to talk. Then when it's your 60th birthday, this one will send them to your residence to attend the birthday banquet. How about that? Zhao Qing said with a hidden meaning. Lu Ying rubbed his chin and looked at the two people chatting and laughing at the stall. His bloated eyes narrowed. Then this official will not be courteous. The young man beside him is not bad either. I can send him over together. Zhao Qing understood. It seemed that this person was not only into men, but also into women. He smiled insincerely and said, I will definitely not disappoint Lord Lu's expectations. Chapter 207. Boss, 2 bowls of glutinous rice balls, one with peanut filling and one with sesame filling. After ordering, she turned around and asked, Big ice cube, what kind of filling do you want? So you ordered those 2 bowls for yourself? Xiao Su did not understand her passion for glutinous rice balls. I'm fine with anything. You have no idea how much I miss the taste of glutinous rice balls. It's fragrant in my mouth and smooth like butter. TSK, 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 my saliva. Boss, another bowl of sesame filling. Chu Qingyan immediately stopped her fantasy and shouted to the boss. Okay, customers, please sit for a while. It will be served to you soon. The boss sang loudly and quickly put the glutinous rice balls into the pot. Chu Qingyan smiled when she heard that, then turned around and pulled Big Ice Cube to find a seat. However, when she saw the slightly dirty table and chairs, she hesitated. It was a little unfair for Big Ice Cube to eat in such a place. As if he did not see the little girl's hesitation, Xiao Su sat down gracefully and poured her a cup of tea. Have a cup of water. You've been running all the way. Seeing that he did not care, Chu Qingyin pursed her lips and smiled mischievously. Okay. Thank you, cousin. Xiao Su shook his head helplessly. The little girl was getting better and better at talking. When the steaming glutinous rice balls were served, Chu Qingyin called out to Big Ice Cube and then eagerly scooped a mouthful of glutinous rice balls into her mouth. Then, Xiao Su saw her slowly frown and spit out the glutinous rice balls. Eat slowly, it's very hot. Chu Qingyin stuck out her tongue, and her eyes were wet like Xiao Wang's. She said pitifully, It's so hot. It's so hot. Xiao Su blew on the glutinous rice balls in the spoon and looked at her. You can't eat hot glutinous rice balls in a hurry. Then, he put the glutinous rice balls into his mouth. Chu Qingyin fanned her mouth and asked enviously, Is it good? It's okay. The sesame filling was not too sweet, and the texture was not bad. Xiao Su said to the point. Chu Qingyin's heart itched when she heard that. She waited for the tang yuan to cool down for a while, then immediately scooped a mouthful and put it into her mouth. The moment she bit through the skin, her eyes narrowed into a line with happiness. It's so good. This is even more original than what I've eaten before. There's no preservatives added, so I can eat it at ease. Her intoxicated expression was easily satisfied. Xiao Su's hand that was holding the spoon paused. It's just a bowl of glutinous rice balls. Is it worth it for you to be so emotional? If others heard this, they would think that I have mistreated you. This is called contentment. Chu Qingyin stirred the glutinous rice balls in her bowl and smiled from the bottom of her heart. Of course, Big Ice Cube treats me very well. No one will think that way. Don't worry. Xiao Su shook his head and let her be. Xiao Su had always been an elegant and fast eater. By the time he finished one bowl, the little foodie opposite him had already finished 2 bowls. Chu Qingyin licked the corner of her mouth and immediately stretched out her hand. Boss, 2 more bowls. Xiao Su raised his hand. No need, this is enough. Big Ice Cube, I'm not full yet. Chu Qingyin protested. Your protest is invalid. Too much is as bad as not enough. You'll have a stomachache at night if you eat so much glutinous rice. Xiao Su heartlessly rejected her request. Cheapskate, drink cold water. Chu Qingyin muttered softly. It was so quiet that her small voice could not escape his ears. However, he did not argue with her. He stood up and waited for her to pay before leaving. Chu Qingyin, who had put down the money, suddenly came back to her senses. Did Big Ice Cube want her to pay when he gave her the money pouch? Looking at the relaxed Big Ice Cube, Chu Qingyin was even more certain of this thought. He knew how to order people around. Xiao Su did not know what she was thinking. He held her hand and slowly walked towards the downtown area. Big Ice Cube, why are there so many begging commoners there? When they walked to the side of an alley, Chu Qingyin was surprised by the beggars lying in the alley. When she finished speaking, those beggars immediately came to her and surrounded the 2 of them. They stretched out their hands and held out their broken bowls as they begged. 2 young masters, please give us some money. We haven't eaten for several days. Please. All of them were sallow and emaciated. Their hair was messy and their faces were dirty. Their clothes were tattered, and some of them were almost naked. Chu Qingyin looked at the person beside her. The money is with you. You decide. Xiao Su did not look at her and knew what she was thinking. Chu Qingyin nodded and took out the money pouch. She took out the money and distributed it. Little young master is a good person. Thank you. We can finally have a meal. Guanyin Bodhisattva, bless us. Thank you. The beggars who received the money thanked her. Chu Qingyin was about to respond when she saw the other beggars rushing over. Chu Qingyin was scared out of her wits. She immediately grabbed the hand of the person beside her and ran in another direction in a panic. Only when she shook off the people behind her did she let out a sigh of relief. She panted as she looked at the person whose face was not red. She could not help but ask, "Why do you look like a normal person?" "Diligent training. You can do it too," Xiao Su replied leisurely. Chu Qingyin sighed. She did not want to argue with him on this issue. Thinking back to the terrifying beggar army just now, she realized that the pitiful amount of money she had was just a drop in the bucket to them. She could not help but ask, Big Ice Block, Pingyang City is prosperous. It's normal to have beggars. But why are there so many of them? Basically, every alley was filled with beggars, not to mention those beggars on the streets. These people should be from Qi County. Xiao Su lowered his head and helped her tidy up her clothes that were messed up from running. He looked up and saw her puzzled expression. He explained, the people in Qi County like to embroider a Chinese rose on their waists. That's the custom of their place. It has been going on for hundreds of years. Chu Qingyin was suddenly enlightened. She did not notice it just now. She did not expect Big Ice Block to be so observant and notice it so quickly. But how knowledgeable must he be to be able to know the customs of a small county by heart? Qi County is one of the 7 counties in the 3 districts under Liu Ying's jurisdiction. However, there was a flood a few years ago, and Qi County was flooded. The imperial court gave out disaster relief money, which was enough for the people affected by the disaster to survive. But these people appeared here. There must be something fishy going on. Xiao Su frowned. He thought of the secret report he had received previously and seemed to have thought of something. Chu Qingyin also recalled the information on the paper she had seen previously. She could not help but think of the missing disaster relief money. At this moment, Chu Qingyin felt the body of the person beside her suddenly tense up. What's wrong? We're being followed, Xiao Su said in a voice that only the two of them could hear when he saw the figure hiding in the dark. Chu Qingyin immediately looked around. Why are we being followed? What should we do? We don't know who the other party is. Don't look around. Pretend that nothing happened and follow me. Xiao Su held her hand and said in a clear and calm voice. Okay. Chapter 208. As soon as the two of them left, a few men dressed as page boys appeared at the spot where they were standing. They scratched their heads and looked around. Where are they? I saw them here. How did they disappear in the blink of an eye? That's strange. Page boy A scratched his head and said in confusion. Yes, our master is really strange. Why did he ask us to capture these two people? Page boy B asked. Page boy C smiled a little wretchedly. Don't you know? Our master is offering Buddha with borrowed flowers. Who doesn't know about our master's relationship with Governor Liu? It's rumored that Governor Liu likes men. Governor Liu was the one who took a fancy to these two young men. So, I see. But what if we lose them? Page boy A was anxious. Look for them again. Otherwise, we won't be able to report back, and we'll be in deep trouble. Page boy B said immediately. Yes. Quickly go and look for them. Even if you have to turn the entire Pingyang city upside down, you must find them. Page boy C rolled up his sleeves and said to the people beside him. Thus, the group walked away. The two people who were standing behind the tree trunk then walked out. I didn't expect that we would be targeted after walking for a while. Chu Qingyin sneered. It was unbelievable. This Governor Liu was actually a pervert who liked both young and old. Obviously, Xiao Su was also a little surprised. At this moment, his expression was ugly. He was prepared to go ahead and investigate, but he was worried about leaving the little fellow alone. But just as he was thinking, a curious voice came from beside him. Big Ice Block. How about we follow those people? Xiao Su lowered his eyebrows and said helplessly, What are you thinking of now? Nothing ventured, nothing gained. How about it? She blinked at him, unable to hide her excitement at this moment. Let's go. Actually, he had intended to do so, but he was worried about the little fellow. Now that she was so excited, he nodded. Hey, where did they go? Why can't we find them? Page boy A looked around, perplexed. That's right. How are we going to report back to our master later? Wait, are those two people? Page boy C pointed in a direction and tugged at the people beside him excitedly. The few of them immediately looked over and saw two people, one big and one small, walking towards a small alley. The servants looked at each other and thought, the heavens are really helping us. They quickly outflanked them. When the two of them walked into the alley, they saw two page boys with bad intentions, and were about to turn and leave. They saw 3 or 4 page boys similarly dressed. Two young masters. My master would like to invite the two of you into the mansion as guests. What do the two of you think? Servant third said with a smile, trying to be polite before resorting to force. However, it was difficult to conceal the evasiveness in his words. Chu Qingyin immediately waved her hand, looking frightened. We're new here and don't know your master. Moreover, my mother said that we should be careful when we're outside. It's not safe to leave with strangers. Page boy, A spat. Damn it. Do you know who our master is? He's the richest man in Pingyang City. People call him Boss Xiao. He owns dozens of shops, and his business is spread all over the world. Don't refuse a toast, only to be forced to drink a forfeit. Hearing this, Xiao Su glanced at these manservants. When the manservants saw this silent and graceful man suddenly raise his head and glance at them with a cold expression, they suddenly felt a chill run down their spines and shivered. But Xiao Su quickly retracted his gaze. The page boys remembered that they outnumbered him and became lively again. Just one sentence. Do you want to leave on your own, or do we have to kidnap you? If you don't want to leave, you still have to leave. Pageboy B flashed 2 hemp ropes as thick as his wrists and waved them in front of the two of them. Chu Qingyin wanted to retort, but the person holding her hand suddenly squeezed her palm. She immediately understood and put on a panicked expression. She said weakly, "Don't kidnap us. We'll leave on our own. Leave on our own. If you fall into that lord's hands, TSK, 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 I can't imagine it." "Huh?" Servant A pointed at Chu Qingyin and laughed out loud. Everyone had a tacit understanding when they heard his words, and an indescribable sense of mockery appeared on their faces. As soon as Servant A finished speaking, he felt a cold gaze fall on him. He immediately stopped laughing and looked in Xiao Su's direction. However, he saw that Xiao Su was looking down and wasn't looking at him. He immediately raised his hand. "To avoid any more trouble, let's go." Then, everyone surrounded the two of them, afraid that they would take the opportunity to slip away. They pushed the two of them to leave quickly. Sensing the sudden coldness from the people beside her, Chu Qingyin laughed softly. These people were laughing so happily. She guessed that when they cried, it would be very ugly. The two of them left with them without saying a word. Pageboy B looked at the two of them. One of them was calm and collected with a leisurely expression. The other's eyes were full of curiosity. He felt a little strange. "I say, why don't these two people look like they were kidnapped? They look like they were going on a sightseeing tour. Why do you care so much? Master asked us to bring them back. We just need to complete the task. Now you just need to think about where to go after you get Master's reward." Pageboy C rolled his eyes at him, feeling that his long-winded nagging was too annoying. Pageboy A said impatiently, "Don't worry. These two people have nothing to do with us once they are in Master's hands. It's their good fortune to be played to death or crippled." Played to death or crippled? Pageboy B's eyes widened in fright. Pageboy A chuckled. "You just entered the residence not long ago. Of course you don't know some secrets. Our master and that lord have known each other for a long time. The servants in our residence more or less know about that lord's hobbies. Do you know why you were able to enter the residence before? Why?" Pageboy B suddenly had a bad premonition. "That's because the servant in your position, Little Six, was taken away by that lord a few days ago. Our master turned a blind eye and didn't pursue the matter." Pageboy A spat and continued, "I heard that yesterday someone was wrapped up from the back door of that lord's house and thrown outside. Some busybodies went to take a look and found that the person was already on the verge of death. It was that servant in our residence, Little Six." Waiter B sucked in a breath of cold air. This was too terrifying. Pageboy C glanced at Chu Qingyin and Little Six and said regretfully, "How pitiful. Perhaps we will see them thrown out in 2 days. Don't worry about it. We're almost at the residence. Chu Qingyin's mouth twitched. These people were sneaking around, worried that they would be heard, but their voices were so loud that it was impossible not to listen. This Lu Ying was really filthy, bullying men and tyrannizing women, doing such inhumane things. Chapter 209. We're here. Chu Qinyin raised her head. In front of her was really the back door of a mansion. However, even a small back door could not hide its extravagance and splendor. It could be seen that these people were right. The old master they were referring to was one of the wealthiest merchants in Pingyang City. It was located in a bustling area, had a big gate and a big courtyard, and all the guards were tall and strong. Chu Qingyin felt that the big block of ice along the way was terrifyingly gloomy and gloomy. Moreover, his gaze seemed to land on those manservants, as if he wanted to tear them apart. Xiao Su looked at these people coldly. If not for the fact that he was going to follow the vine to get the melon, these people who were polluting the little fellow's ears with their filthy mouths would have lost their tongues long ago. These people were completely unaware that they had just escaped a calamity. They entered the door excitedly and said, "Hand them over to the butler, and we'll be done." They entered the back door excitedly. Someone had already gone to report to the butler of the mansion. After waiting for a long time, the butler finally arrived, yawning. Manservant A immediately went forward and said eagerly, "Butler Su, we've brought them here." Butler Su looked at the two people in the courtyard under the dim yellow light of the firelight. The tall one was elegant and elegant, while the small one had delicate features. They were really the kind of people who could not be found in Pingyang City. The pity in his heart disappeared in a flash. He estimated that the value of these two people could be exchanged for another big deal for the old master. Hence, Butler Su did not delay any further. Yes, it's already so late, and the old master has already gone to bed. Take them to the woodshed and wait for the old master to wake up tomorrow. Then, Butler Su, the reward. Manservant B rubbed his hands and asked mischievously. Butler Su nodded. You've done well this time. Tomorrow, go to the accounts room to collect your reward. Thank you, Butler Su. The manservants laughed heartily, and then took the two of them to the woodshed. Behave yourselves. Manservant A warned them before locking up the woodshed. After the noise outside had gone away, Chu Qinyin looked around the messy woodshed and said with some disappointment, I thought we would at least be treated as a gift, but I didn't expect it to only be a small woodshed. Chu Qinyin mumbled to herself as she turned around. The moonlight shone down on the person in front of her. His features were exquisite, and every detail was perfect. Chu Qinyin sighed softly as she turned to look at her surroundings, thinking about how she was going to get through the night. Xiao Su comforted her. We'll be able to go back in a few days. Big Ice Cube. Do you think Wu Ling and the others will be anxious because they can't find us? Only now did she remember this matter. I've already made a mark, so they will receive the news. Xiao Su found a place and sat down without any hesitation. Chu Qinyin saw him sit down and was stunned. When the big ice cube was in the palace, even if the things prepared by the servants weren't the most expensive, they would still be meticulous down to the smallest detail. Once there was a stain on the clothes, it would be changed without any explanation. The room would be spotless without any impurities. But now she saw him casually sit down without caring about the dust on the ground or the cobwebs on his head. She couldn't help but be shocked in her heart. Perhaps seeing the surprise on her little face, Xiao Su raised his eyebrows. It's an emergency, so there's no need to make such a big fuss. Big Ice Cube, I always thought you were obsessed with cleanliness. Chu Qinyin put away the surprise on her face. She squatted down in front of him and teased him with a smile. Xiao Su's lips curled up slightly. When you were on the battlefield, you couldn't be obsessed with cleanliness even if you wanted to. She suddenly remembered that the scripture had told her that Big Ice Cube had spent the longest time outside. For example, in the battlefield, or in his sect, or in many difficult environments. To be able to become what he was today, and not grow up crooked, he was already considered to have a strong will. Outside, he was a general on the battlefield. Living with the soldiers and sleeping with the horses was a common matter. Back then, he was the first prince of a country, the King of England. He ate and dressed according to the standards of the prince, the lord. So, this was the so-called in one's position, one's living style. Big Ice Cube, is it tiring to train or fight outside? After asking this, she felt that her question was actually nonsense. How could it not be tiring outside? For the country, danger lurked everywhere. Life and death were unpredictable, and she was always on edge. She gave a sigh. She was worried about her IQ and wanted to change the topic. But she heard the sound of flowing water coming from above her head. No, if you live a meaningful life, you won't be tired. It's just that I'm willing and happy. She looked up in surprise and saw the person in front of her. His expression was calm and his gaze was still cold. She could feel that what he said just now was not heroic words for the country and the people. He really took the country's safety as his daily responsibility and integrated it into his life. It's just that he's willing and happy? Who in this world could say these words so calmly? Why should I avoid it because of fortune or misfortune? She seemed to be able to really understand the meaning of this sentence. The Big Ice Cube did not put the country on his shoulders, but in his heart. Such a big ice cube who was disputed by the world, ostracized by his relatives, and misunderstood by the people, made her feel distressed. For the world, for the country, for the people, the result was like this. But he had never given up the responsibility in his heart. Otherwise, there was no need for him to appear here. He only needed to obediently search for oars. But he still came. She also sat down on the ground like him. She supported her chin with both hands and said with a solemn expression, "In the future, I will accompany you to protect your country and the world." Xiao Su's eyes fell on the little fellow in front of him. The person who usually talked and laughed was now serious. In order to increase his trust in her, she even tried to put on a serious face. He felt that it was a little funny, but it was not funny. It was as if the string in the depths of his heart was gently touched by these words. "You're still young? You're still young, and your shoulders are not thick enough. You can't take on too much responsibility. You're still young, and your scheming is not deep enough. You can't avoid too many schemes. You're still young, and your willpower is not firm enough. You can't avoid too many grudges and disputes. The road to growth is too long. You'd better grow up under my wings. I'll do my best to protect your safety. This is the only thing I can do for you in this world. I'm not young. Don't look down on me." She was so serious about her oath, but she was treated like this. She could not accept it. The night of late autumn and early winter was already cold. He had internal energy to protect his body, but she was already shivering from the cold. Xiao Su reached out and lifted her from the cold ground and placed her in his arms. Okay. You're very big. I think highly of you, okay?" Why did these words sound so awkward? Once in his arms, Chu Qingyan felt that she was suddenly surrounded by warmth. The cold on her body was dispelled a lot. The Big Ice Cube's chest was warm and reliable, making her sigh comfortably. Actually, the Big Ice Cube was right. Compared to him, she was indeed very small. His arms were very big, just enough to hold the small her. Chapter 210. Big Ice Cube. How can Luing be so daring? He's bullying people right under the Emperor's nose. Isn't he afraid of being reported? Her hands and feet were already warm and not as cold as before. Chu Qingyan began to use her brain and asked the question that she did not understand. Xiao Su turned to look at the skylight. His eyes were deep and seemed to be covered by a thin layer of fog. No one could tell what he was thinking. The most dangerous place is the safest place. Moreover, the Lu family, since the previous generation, has already spread throughout Sichuan. Their connections are intertwined. It can be said that a slight move in one part will affect the whole situation. Therefore, no one in the imperial court will easily touch them. Then this time, Will you handle it impartially? She understood that the Lu family was the Empress Dowager's maternal relatives. When the retired emperor was in charge of the imperial court, in order to protect his maternal relatives, or in other words, to become his strong support in the imperial harem, he had to make his maternal relatives strong enough that no one dared to touch them. Only then could he have a foothold. Then this time, Lu Ying was in the hands of the Big Ice Cube. To the Big Ice Cube, this was actually a tricky matter. It was very likely that he would attract a lot of trouble. Just as he said, a slight move in one part will affect the whole situation. I am the Prince of Sichuan. I have a responsibility to not allow such disloyal, unfilial, and unfilial people to oppress the people. His tone was calm, but firm. Big Ice Cube, good job. Chu Qingyin could not help but give him the thumbs up. Xiao Su raised his hand and patted her head, but the corner of his mouth leaked out an extremely shallow sigh. Chu Qingyin did not notice that the person above her had a faint expression of pain after saying those words. It wasn't until not long later when she learned the truth that she would understand how much effort he had expended to say those words that day, when the moonlight was dim and the woodshed was cold, when that broad shoulder had supported her with warmth. The words he had said had taken a great deal of effort. Perhaps because the embrace was too warm, she felt a trace of tiredness. But she still forced herself to stay awake and smiled at the person in front of her. Actually, Big Ice Cube, I feel that, whether you wear a mask or not, I think you are very good. Appearance may be important to a person, but in my eyes, no matter how you look, no matter how repulsive or ugly you are, in my heart, you are very important. You are as important as my father and mother. Xiao Su suddenly tightened his fingers. Because of her words, Gao Shan's icy cold eyes slightly cracked. He did not expect that she would suddenly say these words. He was a little stunned and a little helpless. Chu Qingyin did not notice the change in his expression. As if she was immersed in her own world, she slowly and softly continued to speak. Some people can clearly use their appearance, but they use their strength to eat. And some people can clearly rely on nothing to run rampant in the world, but they rely on their own strength. Big Ice Cube, you have a status that everyone envies. You have the capital to be proud, but you have never truly cared about it. You are willing to use your own strength to live your own life. You are already very powerful. Only a crab can run rampant in the world. Xiao Su smiled. He knew that she was comforting him. His heart felt warm, and the hand that was patting her head loosened a little. Chu Qingyin chuckled. Being a crab is also pretty good. Whoever dares to block the road, I will reward them with 2 pincers. So overbearing. Be careful that you don't attract resentment. He was amused by her childish words and chuckled. When Chu Qingyin heard this laughter, she felt as if she could hear the hazy sound of a lotus pond. A gentle breeze blew away the lotus leaves, revealing the budding lotus, and then the sound of petals quietly blooming. It was as light as celestial music, as if spring water was flowing from the heavens. Chu Qingyin flipped over and stood up. She only had time to catch the curve of his lips as she murmured, Big Ice Cube, I think I heard you laugh. Xiao Su recovered his cold appearance and flatly denied, You heard wrong. Impossible. Chu Qingyin rubbed her nose. She felt that the Big Ice Cube was shy and refused to admit it. Thus, she imitated those hooligans who tease people and said to him with bad intentions, Girl, come, smile for this master. Xiao Su's face darkened. You don't want to? Then this master will give you a smile. Chu Qingyin leaned forward, blinked her large eyes, and threw him a smiling glance. Xiao Su's face darkened even more. He pulled her into his embrace. Are you itching for a beating? Learn well for 3 years, learn bad for 3 days. Next time if you learn this, be careful that I will punish you by not allowing you to eat snacks. All right, I was wrong. The person who was baring her fangs and brandishing her claws earlier had already become listless. She pitifully tugged at his clothes and weakly said. Xiao Su coldly snorted when he heard this and was unwilling to pay attention to her. Chu Qingyin knew that the Big Ice Cube would not be angry because of this matter. She found a comfortable position in his embrace and then raised her head. At this moment, She could only see the big ice cube's jade-like, beautiful jaw. In the modern era, many people use the beautiful Cape of Good Hope and the scenery in landscape paintings to describe a person's exquisite jaw. At this moment, she felt that this description was really appropriate. Because at this moment, the big ice cube's perfect jaw was simply like this. She blinked her eyes and suddenly smiled. Actually, whether her big ice cube was magnificent and dazzling after changing his appearance or wearing a mask, to her, it was not important. Stunning for a moment, but people would accompany her for a lifetime. Having a beauty's skin, it was better to have a beauty's bones. So what if you have a beauty's skin, but no heart? Xiao Su sensed her bold gaze and lightly sighed. He found that recently his dignity seemed to have been challenged. This little fellow was becoming more and more afraid of him. Just as he was about to urge her to sleep, he heard her suddenly open her mouth, and his fingers immediately tightened. Big Ice Cube, in the future, if you don't want to change your appearance, then wear a mask. If you don't want to wear a mask, then reveal your true appearance. No matter what you look like, Qing Yin will never leave you. Qing Yin is not a superficial person. Everyone loves beauty, but Qing Yin cares more about whether or not a person is good inside, and whether or not they are trustworthy. She would not dislike them, would not abandon them, and would not give them up. This is me, Chu Qing Yin, when I care about a person. Xiao Su was stunned for a moment. When he came back to his senses and lowered his head to say something, his chest tightened, and there was the sound of light breathing. He revealed a faint smile and took off his coat, covering her body. He gathered the little fellow in his embrace and let her come closer to him, dispelling the cold air of the night. After doing this, he lowered his head. The moonlight shined on his face, making it look gentle. It spread into the corners of his eyes, and his slightly raised eyebrows were filled with gentleness and love. If it was a normal day, Hualing and the others would have dug their eyes out if they saw this. How could their powerful and indestructible lord reveal such a gentle side? Xiao Su looked at the quiet little face in his embrace that had a faint glow to it under the faint moonlight, and his heart was at peace. Even if he had won battle after battle and received title after title, he had never been as satisfied as he was now. Or it could be said that his heart was at peace. The little fellow's appearance seemed to make up for the hole in his heart that had been burned by the fire all these years. Little fellow, you don't need to accompany my country. You just need to grow up healthily, and that is enough. I don't know how long I can accompany you, but no matter how long it is, I will not let you suffer any grievances. Happiness and good health, that is my only request for you. Chapter 211. It was too late at night, and the surroundings were too quiet. So much so that it was easy to let go and recall many things that had been buried in the depths of one's memory for a long time. Perhaps sentimental, perhaps lonely, perhaps sorrowful. But the current him, watching all of this, seemed to have become a spectator, and it did not cause any ripples in his heart. Because those emotions that had been difficult to get rid of for many years had already dissipated after the little fellow said those words. It was too tiring to bear it alone. But when someone stood up and told you, I'll taste the sweetness with you, and bear the bitterness with you, the knot in your heart suddenly did not matter so much. Xiao Su's hands tightened, letting her sleep peacefully in his arms. Little fellow, in the future, how will you make me part with you? In the end, he could only sigh softly. The next day, when the sky was bright, Chu Qingyin's eyes were a little numb from the light shining down from the skylight, and she could not help but slowly open her eyes. When she stretched, she touched the coat on her body and knew that it was taken off by Big Ice Cube last night to put it on her. She could not help but raise her head to look around for traces of him. At a glance, she saw that his back was facing her, standing with his hands behind his back, and she did not know what he was thinking. She climbed up, shook the clothes, and then walked in front of him. Big Ice Cube, the morning dew is heavy. Put on the clothes first, be careful not to catch a cold. Xiao Su nodded, took the clothes in her hands, and then said to her, someone's coming. Chu Qingyin immediately looked outside the door vigilantly, Her hearing was not as good as big ice cubes, but after his reminder, she focused and held her breath, but also felt that the footsteps were gradually approaching. A moment later, the woodshed's door was opened, and a few figures walked in with their backs against the light. When those people walked out of the light, Chu Qingyan saw that the leader was a man in his 40s or 50s, whose hands and neck were full of gold necklaces, gold rings, and gold bracelets. Although he was not fat and was very tall, with these heavy gold chains hanging on his body, he looked a lot thicker. Chu Qingyan could not see clearly what the person in front of her looked like, because the gold light shone on his body, making her mistakenly think that it was a golden Buddha statue. In fact, it was the image of a nouveau riche. He was afraid that others wouldn't know that he was rich, so he decorated himself with all the things that could show that he was rich. Chu Qingyan did not expect that the person who kidnapped them would look like this. The scene was too beautiful for her to look at. Just as Chu Qingyan was sizing up this person, Xiao Qing was also sizing them up discreetly. Last night, he had only caught a glimpse at the inn, and it was too late at night, so he could only see a rough outline. Now that he saw it, even Xiao Qing, who had seen all kinds of people, could not help but be stunned. Gentle gentleman, outstanding charm, childish and beautiful face. That Lu Ying's eyes were really sharp. With just a glance, he saw these two top-notch beauties. Young masters, I'm Xiao Qing, a merchant in Pingyang City. I brought the two of you to my residence last night, but it was too late, and I didn't have the time to entertain you. Please forgive me. Xiao Qing pretended that he did not know anything about the two of them sleeping in the woodshed last night, and said politely. Chu Qingyan had a new understanding of this Xiao Qing. The appearance of a nouveau riche, the attitude of a scholar, the combination of vulgarity and elegance was simply breathtaking. She could not stand such a mixture of styles. She'd better let Big Ice Cube entertain them. Hence, she pretended to be afraid and hid behind him. How could Xiao soon not know what she was thinking? He smirked and looked at Xiao Qing. It's our first time here, and we're not familiar with this place. We're not related to you, boss. May I know why you're looking for us? They had just arrived in Pingyang City and looked like they were just passing by. Xiao Qing immediately calculated in his heart. If that was the case, it would not matter if anything happened to them in Pingyang City. Anyway, no one would pursue the matter to him. Hence, Xiao Qing revealed the sly smile of a merchant. Young masters, how should I address you? I'm Xiao Su. This is my cousin, Chu Qingyan. Xiao Su did not mind that Xiao Qing had deliberately changed the topic and replied smoothly. Good names. Xiao Qing clapped his hands and smiled. Then, he said to the two people in front of him, I feel that I hit it off with you two brothers. Why don't we be friends? Chu Qingyan could not help but want to roll her eyes. Did he really think that they were inexperienced young masters who could be fooled with just a few words? He was simply too naive, all right? Everyone is a friend. Thank you for thinking so highly of us, Boss Xiao. Xiao Su replied methodically, as if he did not feel that Xiao Qing was trying to coax them. A few black lines appeared on Chu Qingyan's forehead. Big Ice Cube, can you not play along with him like this? All right, then you can stay in my residence for the next 2 days. The residence has been quiet recently. It's just nice that you're here. If you have any requests now, feel free to state them. I'll satisfy them as long as it's within my means. Xiao Qing said generously when he heard this, looking very hospitable. Then get us a clean room first. Although this place is a little big, I'm still not used to sleeping with so many rats and ants at night. Chu Qingyan could not help but speak up. She spoke with a straight face, as if they were not rats and ants who had slept with them last night. Xiao Qing could not maintain the smile on his face. He smiled embarrassedly and immediately got someone to arrange a room. Little young master, is there anything else you need? Chu Qingyan thought for a while and said awkwardly, I'm a little picky when it comes to food. Xiao Qing waved his hand when he heard this. It's fine. It's nothing. Just tell me what you need. All right. I like Boss Xiao's personality. I won't stand on ceremony then. Chu Qingyan rubbed her chin and said slowly, I can't eat things that are too sweet, but I can't do without it. I don't like to eat things that are too salty, but I can't do without it. Every dish must at least have a spicy flavor, but I can't eat chili. Every meal must at least have something that flies in the sky, crawls on the ground, or swims in the water. Otherwise, I won't be able to eat. Chu Qingyan blurted out. She then looked at Xiao Qing apologetically. I'm a troublesome person, but Boss Xiao is a good person, so I won't treat you as an outsider. No, no, no. It's my honor. Xiao Qing wiped the sweat on his forehead. This person was not picky at all. She was just finding trouble for him. After Chu Qingyan and Xiao Qing were taken away, Xiao Qing's smiling face immediately turned cold. Get someone to investigate the identities of these two people. Also, serve them well for the next 2 days. But don't forget to add some seasoning to their meals. I want them to have the strength to walk in, but not the strength to escape. I don't want anything to happen to the birthday banquet in 2 days. Yes. The person beside him immediately responded. These two people were a little strange. They were not afraid, nor were they noisy. It was as if they were really here as guests. Xiao Qing had lived for half his life, but he had never seen a kidnapping situation where they could wait peacefully for the mastermind to appear. He felt a little uneasy. Chapter 212. After being brought into a clean and tidy room, Chu Qingyan glanced at the furnishings inside and chuckled. They are indeed rich and imposing. These must be expensive. When the page boy who led the two of them heard this, he immediately raised his chin and looked at them as if they were country bumpkins entering the city. Both of you may look and talk, but be careful not to damage the things inside. Otherwise, even if you sell yourself, you won't be able to pay for it. With that, the page boy left with his head held high. Chu Qingyan rubbed her chin and sneered. Isn't this called a tiger that is bullied by dogs? Xiao Su sighed. You should be thankful that you don't bully others. Chu Qingyan immediately frowned. She was not so fierce. She was clearly a weak woman, all right? After being tormented for an entire night and morning, her stomach was already empty. At this moment, the door was pushed open, and the people outside came in one by one with plates. Steaming hot dishes were placed on the table one by one. Chu Qingyan smacked her lips. The people in Xiao Qing's residence were really efficient. It had not even been an hour, and they had already prepared everything for her. Sweet and sour pork ribs, barbecued pigeon, small white fish amaranth soup, lotus seed chicken soup. Everything that crawled on the ground, flew in the sky, swam in the water, sweet, salty, spicy, and not so spicy were included. Chu Qingyan thought to herself. Xiao Qing had spent so much effort to keep them in the Xiao residence because he wanted to present them to Lu Ying as a birthday gift. It was obvious that Xiao Qing was preparing to collude with Lu Ying. Last night, she had already heard from the servants that the two of them had a close relationship. There was no need for him to curry favor with Lu Ying. It could only be said that Xiao Qing wanted to gain more benefits through Lu Ying. However, she would only have the energy to think after eating. She placed the chopsticks on the table and called out, "Big Ice Cube, it's time to eat." Xiao Su heard her and walked over. He glanced at the dishes on the table and frowned. Then, he lowered his eyes and looked at the windowsill. He suddenly understood. Chu Qingyan saw him standing there and not eating. She could not help but ask, "You won't be fooled just by looking. Here, I'll give you a pair of chopsticks." Chu Qingyan smiled and placed the chopsticks in his hand. However, he grabbed her fingers. Just as she was puzzled, she heard Big Ice Cube's voice transmission. "Don't touch these dishes, there's a problem." Chu Qingyan's expression suddenly turned serious as she looked at the delicious food. Then, she followed Big Ice Cube's gaze and saw a head peeping at them from the windowsill. She immediately understood. She chuckled and casually picked up a drumstick. She deliberately raised her voice and said, "What kind of drumstick is this?" The skin is not crispy, and the meat is not delicious. Even if you feed it to a dog, it won't eat it. Calm, out, done, and... After confirming that the servant had disappeared, Chu Qingyan asked softly, "What do you think is in it?" It's nothing more than an anesthetic that makes people lose their strength. Xiao Su took out a bottle of medicine from his arms. He poured out one of the pills and handed it to her. This is the antidote to ordinary drugs developed by Ethereal. Chu Qingyin took it without any suspicion. Then she asked curiously, Big Ice Cube, how did you know that this dish was drugged? Xiao Su sat down on the chair and said indifferently, the request you made just now was almost harsh, but Zhao Qing readily agreed. This is one of the reasons. Secondly, these dishes have a faint fragrance. This is the smell of the soul, enchanting fragrance. Chu Qingyin heard this and immediately leaned over to smell the food on the table. However, in the end, she only smelled the aroma of the food. She couldn't distinguish the fragrance at all. You can't smell it. When I was practicing martial arts, identifying ordinary drugs and poisons was one of the courses. Xiao Su saw her sniffing here and there like a puppy. He couldn't help but interrupt her. Eat quickly. Stop sniffing. Chu Qingyin retracted her body. Her face was full of anger. This Zhao Qing is really a scheming businessman. Actually, he was already suspicious this morning. In order to make sure nothing goes wrong, he came up with this plan. Xiao Su said calmly. He picked up a piece of pork rib for her. Chu Qingyin nodded. At this time, she was already attracted by the aroma of the food and began to eat heartily. In the Xiao family hall, Zhao Qing drank tea and asked casually, those dishes, did they touch them? The servant reported, Master, those two people have already eaten the food. This servant saw them go to bed after eating. It's estimated that it's working. Good. You continue to watch. If there's any movement, come and report. Yes. Very quickly, it was nighttime. Chu Qingyin was just about to rest when she heard a light knock on the window. 3 long knocks, 2 short knocks, and another one. She immediately got up. Xiao Su had already walked to the window and opened it. The person outside flipped over and came in. Master, young master. A cheerful voice followed. Hualing. Chu Qingyin jumped off the bed. She didn't expect that the person who came was him. Hualing smiled at her, then said to his master, Master, this subordinate received your mark last night and followed the path to find you. It's just that I didn't come in rashly last night. Today, after finding out more, I immediately rushed over. And this subordinate received news that Zhao Qing wanted to use Lu Ying to get in touch with the Salt Patrol Imperial Censor of Huai and get salt in advance. Sure enough, it was as he expected. Xiao Su's eyes turned cold. He picked up the dried paper on the table and handed it to him. This is what I wrote down today. Go back and do according to it. After Hualing took it, he glanced over it before folding it and putting it away in his clothes. This subordinate will seriously carry out the orders. Master, please be assured. Xiao Su nodded. He always trusted his subordinates. After Hualing finished his business, he turned around and took out a small cloth bag from his chest. He handed it to the young princess consort. This is what the old man had this subordinate bring to satisfy your cravings. Chu Qingyin was a bit surprised. After taking it, she opened it and found that it was freshly baked pastries. She couldn't help but be happy. This retired emperor still missed her quite a bit, actually remembering that she liked mung bean cakes. Just as she put one in her mouth, she heard Hualing continue. The old man said, 1 mung bean cake in exchange for 1 plate of pastries. What? Asking for a sky-high price. Bargaining on the ground, right? This plan was truly well thought out. Xiao Su and Hualing saw her little face scrunch up like a chrysanthemum and couldn't help looking away. When it came to food, the retired emperor was very shrewd. Chu Qingyin had no choice but to suffer in silence. Time flew by, and in the blink of an eye, it was the day of Lu Ying's birthday banquet. The Xiao family servants carried out the unconscious Xiao Su and Chu Qingyin from the room. They placed the 2 of them into 2 wooden boxes. There were several holes in the wooden boxes to prevent the people inside from suffocating to death. Zhao Qing looked at the wooden boxes tied with red ribbons in satisfaction. According to the amount of medicine they had taken in the past 2 days, they were already unconscious. Zhao Qing revealed a devious smile and then gave the order, Go to the Lu Manor. You're tuning into the Romance Rendezvous YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.